Chapter 741. The situation in the upper three heavens was complicated. The Chu clan was content to stay in one corner, but there were also constant conflicts in the open and in the dark. The current strength of the Chu clan was basically in the hands of the clan master. The high-level experts were basically the seniors of the Chu clan. They were all in seclusion when they had nothing to do. The other two big clans in the flat mountain ridge, the Bao clan and the Liao clan, were slightly weaker than the Chu clan, but not by much. The two clans were abnormally strong. Small frictions and conflicts happened every day. And this flat mountain ridge and the entire southeast area after the flat mountain ridge belonged to the Shao clan, one of the big dominant clans. There were dragons and crouching tigers, strange people, and sections. They were fighting for the chance to survive in the cruel survival of the fittest. A piece of land in the east, a Shao in the southeast, 10,000 miles of waves in the west. These were the clans, Shao clan and Qin clan. Shocking stones in the northwest, proud Ling clan in the southwest, fragrant orchids in the south. These were the Shi clan, Ling clan and Lan clan. Sharp swords in the north, mighty Zhuge clan in the south. These were the Li clan, Zhuge clan and Yi clan. These were the big dominant clans in the upper three heavens. The big clans each dominated a region. In the recent thousands of years, there were always some clans that emerged to fight for power and territory. Some clans even wanted to be independent and not be controlled by the big clans. Some clans even wanted to replace the big clans. These clans, without exception, were all annihilated. But it could also be seen that the big clans' control over the upper three heavens was not as good as before. The upper three heavens had been around for tens of thousands of years. Naturally, not everyone in the upper three heavens was a cultivator. There were more ordinary people. So, the basic necessities here could still be settled with gold and silver. But, as long as it involved the business of the big clans, it was a different situation. In the group of cultivators, they used spiritual energy to pave the way and crystal stones as currency to buy or exchange the items they wanted. Crystal stones were not only a currency, but also a source of spiritual energy for cultivation. Purple crystal, black crystal, red crystal, blue crystal, and white crystal. 1 purple crystal was equivalent to 10 black crystals, 1 black crystal was equivalent to 10 red crystals, and so on. 1 purple crystal that was circulated by the government was equivalent to 10,000 white crystals. This was the ratio. King of Hell Chu felt that he was a pauper. He had never felt so poor before. After accepting Duke Yu's white crystal ores, other than absorbing them, he also stored 7,000 to 8,000 pieces in his tribulation space. He had originally thought that this was a very, very large sum of wealth. Who would have thought that it was actually not even enough to exchange for a single purple crystal? As for the mountains of gold and silver in the space, King of Hell Chu sighed. I'll donate those to the clan in a few days. Letting the clan steward use it to do business with ordinary people, he really had no use for it. Motherfucker, I've been in the lower three heavens for half a lifetime. Everyone in the lower three heavens is either afraid of me or admiring me. I can also command a region in the lower three heavens. I didn't expect that I would become a small shrimp in the upper three heavens. Moreover, I'm a poor shrimp. In his previous life, although Chu Yang had reached the upper three heavens, he had only been a mere revered martial artist. He had taken a huge risk before he finally found an unknown channel and went straight to the Wind Thunder platform. They had to eat and sleep in the open along the way. They had to hide from place to place. When they finally arrived, they were immediately killed by Mo Tianji and his people. It could be said that he knew nothing about Wu San Tian. For the current Chu Yang, even though he had the experience of 2 lifetimes, this upper three heavens was still a completely unfamiliar world. Especially, the big dominant clans that ruled the upper three heavens. Almost every clan had their own rules and taboos in their territory. In this way, the chances of conflict in the Jianghu would increase by 100 times. Not to mention that other than the big clans, in such a vast area like the upper three heavens, there were many different forces. And any one of these forces was not something that the current Chu Yang could afford to offend. Everything was completely different from the lower three heavens and the upper three heavens. Whether it was the customs or the ways of the Jianghu, they were all completely different. When Chu Yang had just finished listening, he was actually a little stunned. He remembered a sentence that Duke Yu and Diwu Qingro had said before. Actually, these are really nothing. Now that he thought about it, these words were really reasonable. The reason why Diwu Qingro admitted defeat so easily and did him a big favor while he himself obtained great luck was because in his heart, these are really nothing. Indeed, they are nothing. Compared to the colorful world of the upper three heavens, the lower three heavens and the upper three heavens were like child's play. As for the so-called experts of the upper three heavens and the lower three heavens, in the vast world of the upper three heavens, they were even less than a fart. Chu Yang had a feeling, I am a pauper, but I came to a world full of millionaires. What made him the most speechless was that the millionaires in his eyes were still at the lowest level here. He was like a beggar who suddenly came to a state banquet. There was a dazzling lineup, but it could not hide the confusion in his heart. What should I do? At night, Chu Yang lay on the bed, unable to fall asleep for a long time. Finally, he gritted his teeth and thought, what am I, Chu Yang, afraid of? Didn't I come from beyond the heavens sect as a commoner? What am I afraid of? Didn't I still become the hegemony of Iron Cloud? When I first came to the upper three heavens, wasn't I alone and unarmed? In the end, didn't I overturn the entire upper three heavens? The upper three heavens is just a little bigger. That's all. He encouraged himself, and then began to plan what to do next. It was impossible to find the fifth fragment of the tribulation sword in a short time. He could only establish a foothold in the clan, then build up the clan and develop it step by step. When he was strong enough and met the standards of the fifth fragment, he could go and find it. Before that, he could not let anyone find out about his identity. Therefore, he had to abandon everything in the past. Everything had to start from the beginning. I am a pauper now. I have to put myself at the lowest level of the entire world, then climb up step by step. As long as I have the slightest arrogance, I am afraid I will die without a burial place. Chu Yang slowly made up his mind, and his heart slowly calmed down. His identity as King of Hell Chu could not be mentioned again. He was an abandoned child that his parents found with great difficulty. As for his origin, he might as well use his brain. The name King of Hell Chu was famous in the lower three heavens, but there were very few people in the upper three heavens who would pay attention to it. In a huge world like the upper three heavens, there was probably no one who would put King of Hell Chu in their eyes. If he wanted to hide, he had a great chance. After a period of silence, he could slowly appear again. Then, no one would associate him with the Tribulation Sword Master. Thinking of this, Chu Yang suddenly realized that Divine Dr. Chiu's diagnosis of his cultivation being crippled was actually the best amulet in his current situation. Yes, Old Wu was crippled. Old Wu had to cultivate from the beginning. Have you ever seen a Tribulation Sword Master being crippled? Is this a joke? With this layer of protection, whatever he did would not attract much attention. If he secretly recovered his strength, not only could he protect himself, but more importantly, he could also trick people. Of course, during this period of time, he could not avoid seeking medical treatment. Although it was a little troublesome for the clan, Chu Fei Long was now in charge. This old man had always been eyeing the three of them covetously. I will let him run errands for me. Of course, Mother would also be worried. I will accompany her and coax her during this period of time, and everything will be fine. When I recover my cultivation and gradually rise up, I will treat it as compensation for her. Mother, one day, I will let you be proud of me. To manage external affairs, one must first settle internal affairs. The Chu family must be forged into a solid block of iron as the first step. Otherwise, with such a huge burden and concern here, he would be played to death by the big clans, and the rise of the clan depended on strength and wealth. Strength was martial power. Wealth was motherfucker's crystal stones. Minister Chu gritted his teeth. Even if Old Wu had to cheat and steal, he would still become the richest person in the heavens. Motherfucker. You're so insidious. A voice sounded a little tired. Chu Yang was stunned. His divine sense entered the space of his consciousness, and he could not help but be surprised. You're awake? The one who spoke was the sword spirit. Your divine sense has been fixed forever. How can I not wake up? The sword spirit smiled bitterly. You're in the upper three heavens? Yes. Chu Yang nodded honestly. You're too weak now. So, your plan just now is completely feasible. The sword spirit pondered for a while and said, I basically agree with your approach and plan. Making a fortune quietly is the way of a king. He paused and reminded. I'm already awake now. I'll be able to recover in 3 days at most. In another half a month, I'll have the cultivation of the fourth fragment of the tribulation sword. Moreover, your divine sense has been fixed forever. Now that I'm in your body, there's no harm to your divine sense. So, if you're in absolute danger, or if you need to kill all of them, just call me out. He smiled ferociously. After 10,000 years, I can't wait to see what the experts of the upper three heavens are like now. Chu Yang smiled deeply. Don't worry, there'll be plenty of opportunities for you to make a move. The sword spirit smiled knowingly. A murderous aura reverberated back and forth in the tribulation space, as if a demon that had been suppressed for 10,000 years was showing its ferocious fangs. Chu Feiling and Yang Rulin were also sleepless that night when Chu Yang was making his plans. Say, what should we do about that? Yang Rulin frowned. There's nothing we can do. Chu Feiling sighed and lay beside his wife, somewhat absent-minded. Ever since his son went missing, he had been deprived of the right to share a bed with his wife. These few days, he had finally received the Emperor's grace. Chu Feiling felt that the bitterness was over and the sweetness was about to come. There's nothing we can do? Yang Rulin raised her eyebrows. Is my grandson going to stay in the lower three heavens like this? Then what do you want? Chu Feiling said innocently. Firstly, your junior sister begged us not to tell him. We have to worry about this, don't we? If we fall out, she won't even let you see your grandson. That'll be really bad. Secondly, Yan Yan has lost his cultivation and his meridians have been destroyed. Although he's forcing a smile every day to make us happy, we're all martial artists. How can we not know this feeling? If we mention this now, won't we only make him sad and worried, but we can't do anything about it. Won't this be torture? Alas. Yang Rulin sighed. She was upset and her heart was in a mess. After Chu Feiling finished speaking, he saw that his wife was no longer speaking, so he felt relieved. He leaned towards his wife and said gently, Let's sleep? Yang Rulin was anxious and had no mood to think. She shouted angrily, Get out! She stomped her foot. With a thud, Chu Feiling flew out of the bed and sat on the ground. He wanted to cry but had no tears. Chapter 742. The next morning, Chu Yang told Chu Feiling about his plans. Chu Feiling was worried that if Chu Yang's identity was made public, it would cause unnecessary trouble. Moreover, people would use this as an excuse to attack him. Now that he heard Chu Yang's suggestion, it was exactly what he wanted and he agreed. He discussed the plan with his wife. When he was traveling in the three heavens, he accidentally found the purple crystal jade essence, and then realized that it was his son. The whole family discussed this matter peacefully for a long time. After settling this matter, everyone felt as if a burden had been lifted from their minds. Father, you don't look too good. Chu Yang realized that Chu Feiling's face was a little pale and his eyes were a little red. He looked a little dispirited. Sigh. It's a long story. How could Chu Feiling tell his son about his shameful past? He said vaguely. Yang Ruolan blushed and looked at Chu Feiling. She was a little embarrassed. How could she not understand that Chu Feiling had been deprived of his right to do that when he was in his prime? And until now, he had never been a womanizer for 18 years. Such a man was a rare and responsible man even in the entire heavens world. Not to mention his cultivation, tolerance, and other aspects, just this point alone was enough to make anyone admire him. She thought, if there's no harm in it, as she thought about it, her face blushed even more. Chu Yang saw that his parents' expressions became awkward and he couldn't help but laugh. He winked and said meaningfully, I know. Chu Feiling and Yang Ruolan slapped him and reprimanded him in unison. What do you know? Chu Yang staggered from the slap. At this moment, old Master Chu Xiongqing sent someone to report that he had invited a doctor and was about to come. These few days, old Master had been coming here several times a day. It was obvious that he was very concerned. As for the doctors he had brought, there were more than 10 of them. Each of them was called a divine doctor in the local area. But after a long time, there was no effect. The miraculous doctors had all come with great ambitions and left dejectedly. Gradually, Chu Feiling and his wife lost all hope. After a while, old Master came with a divine doctor. After a round of examination, he still left without any solution. The old Master stayed behind. He didn't say anything and just sighed. The old Master was worried about the Chu family's inheritance. This was a huge matter. Throughout history, the inheritance of aristocratic families was passed down to the elders and not to the young. It was to prevent brothers from killing each other. However, in Chu Feiling's generation, there was a problem. Originally, Chu Feiling's ability was more than enough to take over the position of clan master. However, she had strangely lost her own son, and since then, she had never had another child. In that case, there would be no successor. Besides, Chu Feiling had been depressed ever since he lost his son. He only cared about finding a son to comfort his wife, and he didn't pay much attention to the family affairs. Old Master had no choice but to let Chu Feilong take over. But I didn't expect that Chu Feilong's scheming methods were not inferior to Chu Feiling's. In fact, he was even better than Chu Feiling. He managed the entire Chu clan in an orderly manner, and it was thriving day by day. As a result, old Master Chu began to mutter in his heart. Over the years, Chu Feilong's position had been confirmed. But he didn't expect that Chu Feilong would be found. This made old Master ecstatic, but he was completely conflicted. Then, he saw that Sun Mo had a fight with his second uncle the moment he woke up, and even gained the upper hand. Old Master's heart began to move again. This fellow is definitely not a well-behaved fellow. If the position was passed to Chu Feilong, this fellow would definitely turn the Chu clan upside down in a few years' time. Therefore, old Master had the idea of passing the position down to the elders. But just as he had this idea, he heard that Sun Mo had been crippled. Old Master, who had just come out of a volcano, was suddenly thrown into an ice cave. This emotional journey was like riding a roller coaster. It was simply unbearable. Fortunately, old Master didn't have a heart disease. Otherwise, his illness would have already acted up. Old Master held on to the slightest hope that Sun Mo could be cured. He kept looking for divine doctors to treat Sun Mo so that he could be cured quickly, but he didn't expect the divine doctors to shake their heads and stare. They were helpless. There was no need to mention how awkward old Master's heart was. He shook his head and sighed for a while. Then, he sat down and comforted Chu Yang. What kind of eloquence did Minister Chu have? With just a few words, he managed to coax old Master into a happy mood. Old Master squinted his eyes and stroked his beard. He felt that this Sun Mo was really to his liking. Smart, resourceful, and scheming. Once Sun Mo was cured, he would also have strength. Where could he find such a successor to the clan? But on the surface, he still kept a straight face and said, "Don't give me that. You only know how to flatter me." Chu Yang's face was full of admiration. He spread out his hands and said helplessly, "Look, if it was an ordinary person, he would have fainted. Only grandfather is so wise. You can tell that I'm flattering you at a glance. This really makes me feel a little defeated. Sigh, there are so many wise people in the heavens, but how many of them are deceived by others? It's impossible for second grandfather. Grandfather's eyes are like torches. He can see through everything. He's quick-witted and vigorous even though he's old. He saw through my thoughts clearly. Facing such a wise grandfather, flattery will definitely not work. I can only tell the truth in the future. Old Master's back straightened even more. He squinted his eyes and stroked his beard. He smiled deeply and said, "That's right. How can I be coaxed by a few words from a brat like you? Grandfather is so wise. I'm also experienced and knowledgeable. I've never seen a powerful person as clear-headed as you." Minister Chu said from the bottom of his heart, "These words are reasonable. How can those vulgar people be compared to me?" Old Master crossed his legs. He looked like he was floating in the air. Chu Yan once again threw out one flattery after another, as if it was free of charge. Master accepted all of them. Yang Ruolan and Chu Fei Ling sat on one side in a daze. They only felt goosebumps all over their bodies. Their whole body was alternating between hot and cold. They looked at the shameless grandfather and grandson in disbelief. They only felt dizzy. Their father, who had always been majestic, would fly into a rage when he saw others flattering him. Now, he was more dizzy than anyone else. This well-behaved son, who looked upright, was now crazily flattering him. He said it so sincerely and innocently. The husband and wife only felt that they couldn't understand the ways of the world. After a long time, when Minister Chu's mouth was about to dry up, the old master finally stood up and said, "You guys chat, ha ha ha, my good grandson, you're really a good and considerate child. Grandpa will come and talk to you when he has time." Then, as if he was riding the clouds and riding the mist, he floated out of the room. He thought to himself, "Looks like it won't be too late to look at the inheritance later." Chu Yang wiped his sweat and said, "That's amazing. Old Master's tolerance is too strong. An ordinary person would probably be blushing after being flattered by me for a third of the time." Old Master's face didn't even turn red from the beginning to the end. Yang Ruolan and Chu Fei Ling looked at each other. They were speechless, like two ducks who were struck dumb by lightning. In the afternoon, everyone in the Chu clan knelt down and kowtowed under the leadership of Chu Xiongqing. Then, Chu Yang went forward and kowtowed to the ancestors one by one. The whole process was solemn. This announced that the eldest grandson of the Chu clan had finally returned. Minister Chu's face was solemn and he muttered in his heart, Chu Yang, who had been surnamed Chu for 10 years, was finally considered a member of the Chu clan today. Then, Old Master Chu Xiongqing announced in public, Chu Yang was officially recognized as the eldest grandson of the Chu clan. From today onwards, Chu Yang's monthly salary would be distributed according to the standard of a direct descendant. Every month, he would receive 2 blue crystals and 50 white crystals. In addition, he would receive 500 taels of silver and 20 taels of gold for daily needs. When this decision was made, no one had any objections. Even Chu Feilong, who was angered by Chu Yang to the point of vomiting blood, seemed to have returned to normal today. He had a warm smile on his face and a graceful demeanor. The way he looked at Chu Yang was also filled with warmth. It was as if nothing had happened. This was his favorite nephew. Even with Chu Yang's scheming mind, he couldn't help but be shocked. Chu Feilong's scheming mind was indeed not to be underestimated. After suffering such humiliation, he actually acted as if nothing had happened. Such a smiling tiger was the most difficult to deal with. Then, it was time to greet the elders of the clan. Without exception, everyone gave a red packet. Chu Feilong handed over a red packet and laughed heartily. Naturally, Chu Yang was also respectful, friendly, and full of childlike feelings. This scene caused everyone in the hall to exclaim in admiration. The Chu clan's culture is indeed harmonious. Only Old Master Chu Xiongqing, Chu Fei Yan and Chu Fei Ling saw this scene and couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. This pair of uncle and nephew, if they didn't handle it well, the entire Chu clan would definitely be in a bloodbath. When Chu Yang met his fourth uncle Chu Fei Yan, the red packet he gave him was especially heavy. Chu Yang raised his head, and saw a face full of anxiety and pleading. This face was very familiar. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. He smiled and greeted his fourth uncle, but didn't say anything. Chu Fian was greatly relieved. He laughed heartily and patted Chu Yang's shoulder. What a great nephew! You're really talented, elegant, and handsome. Ha, I'll look for you in a while. Let's get to know each other better as uncle. Chu Yang smiled and agreed. Everyone's jaws dropped to the ground. Fourth brother is the punching bag of the entire clan. He's always so inflexible, as if everyone owes him a lot of money. When did he become so enthusiastic? Look at all the praises. His nephew, whom he had just met, had been praised to the point of being a flower. Chu Fei Long's eyes flashed, and he glanced at Chu Fei Yen intentionally. Then, a few brothers came up to greet Chu Yang. Chu Tinghu came up first and stared at Chu Yang for a while before he finally greeted. Big brother! You may dispense with the formalities, Chu Yang said in an ostentatious manner. Chu Tinghu smiled and stepped aside. Chu Yang muttered in his heart, just like me, he's also a smiling tiger. However, his skills are still too low. Chapter 743. The few little brothers came up to greet him one by one. Chu Yang also received them with a smile. Then, two little Lolas walked over. This is your third uncle's daughter, Lur. This is your fourth uncle's daughter, Xiao Xiao. Yang Rulin's eyes were full of pity. Chu Yang took a look and saw that Chu Lur was only 11 or 12 years old while Chu Xiao Xiao was only 5 years old. Chu Xiao Xiao was adorable and innocent. She took Chu Yang's red packet and jumped with joy. Her big eyes narrowed into crescents. As for Chu Lur, Chu Yang didn't know what to say. Her hair was a little yellow, and her eyes were lifeless. She was frighteningly thin. Light green blood vessels were clearly visible on her fair skin. It was just a few steps, but she actually walked for a while. She was so tired that she was panting. She almost fainted when she bent down. Chu Yang hurriedly supported her and said, Lur, you don't have to be so polite. Then he asked, Sister Lur, are you feeling unwell? Chu Lur smiled bleakly and said, I'm fine. Don't worry. Chu Yang was about to ask when Yang Rulin secretly gave him a look. Chu Yang could only swallow the question back into his stomach. A beautiful woman came out and carefully helped Chu Lur back. Her face was full of sorrow. Chu Yang looked at Chu Lur's back and was in a daze. Although Chu Lur was young, there was already a sense of despair in her eyes. Moreover, whether it was her expression or her aura, it was very similar to Mo Qingwu's expression when she was rejected by him in his previous life. It was a feeling of utter despair and despair, a feeling of sadness and sadness. Chu Yang's heart couldn't help but ache. On the way back, Yang Rulin sighed and said, Lur's life is too hard. She's such a lovable little girl, but she contracted such a strange disease. Strange disease? Chu Yang asked. Yes, Yang Rulin said. When your third aunt was pregnant with Lur, she was ambushed on the road and fought with them. Her fetus was hurt. At that time, no one thought much of it. But after Lur was born, she had a high fever and cried all night. It was only later that we got a doctor to take a look that we found out that the fetus was finally affected. Congenital deficiency. Yang Ruolan remained silent for a while. Then she said these words. But if it was a simple congenital deficiency, it wouldn't be so serious. During this time, Chu Yang had been trying his best to digest the memories of the first-generation Tribulation Sword Master. Among them, there were medical skills. In addition, he was not unfamiliar with medical skills. Ever since he received the medical books from Du Shiqing, his attainments were already extraordinary. Naturally, he could tell that Yang Ruolan was hiding something from him. Congenital deficiency. Yes, she suffered a concussion in her mother's womb. I don't know what happened, but she injured her head. Every day, he would have a headache and his entire body would convulse and roll around in pain. Sometimes, she would suddenly fall into a coma for a long time. Usually, she would be very sleepy. Such a good little girl, to be tormented by this strange illness. Sigh. Yang Ruolan let out a long sigh. There are so many divine doctors, is there really no way? Chu Yang frowned. There's nothing I can do, Yang Ruolan said a little angrily. Those bunch of quacks didn't even find the cause of the illness. They could only see the child in pain but couldn't do anything. They didn't even have a way to reduce the child's pain. They could only watch the child continue to suffer. Sigh, for this child's illness, your third uncle has been out searching for elixirs all year round. He would only come home once when he found one. Your third aunt is younger than me this year. It looks like she's already much older than me. Even when her illness doesn't act up, she still has headaches. When it acts up, it's only 10 times worse. In other words, Lur is 11 years old this year. For the past 11 years, she has been in pain almost all the time. So that's how it is. Chu Yang said and frowned. No wonder Chu Lur had that kind of expression. She had been enduring this kind of pain all the time. She had already endured it for as long as her life was long. Chu Yang sighed deeply in his heart. How could this kind of pain be endured by a little girl who was like a flower? But not only did Chu Lur endure it, she had already endured it for 11 years. How did she endure it for 11 years? Would heavy pills be effective for this kind of illness? Normal heavy pills won't be effective, the sword spirit said in his consciousness. This illness is congenital. Her meridians are congenitally blocked and twisted. In her brain, there's also an extremely fine kind of damage. Normal medicines won't work at all. Normal medicines won't work? Chu Yang pondered and said, That means there's still a way? Yes, but this method is also quite difficult. It needs to be gathered together before it can be treated. The sword spirit said. Gathered together? Chu Yang asked. Gathered together means absolute vine, colored lotus, single flower, jade clover ganoderma, life pangolin, lifeless death water, heavenly jade elixir, earthine soul ginseng, together with the ingredients for heavy pills and other rare herbs, to refine 3 special incomplete heavy pills. Only by taking 1 pill every month can the illness be completely cured. The sword spirit's words made Chu Yang suck in a breath of cold air. Not to mention how difficult it was to find these 8 herbs, just their medicinal power alone was enough to shock people. Other than the jade clover ganoderma and heavenly jade elixir, the rest were all highly toxic. And all of them were top-class poisons in the world. It was one of the 10 most toxic poisons in the heavenly layer. When these poisons were mixed together, even a supreme martial artist would be poisoned to death. Now, they were actually used to treat a little girl who was like a flower? It's the limit. Life also means death. Only between life and death can one come back from the dead. Your sister's life is already on the verge of extinction. And it's a congenital illness that's even more difficult to treat. That's why it needs to be gathered together, the sword spirit said. If she can't be treated within 2 years, I'm afraid. 2 years? Chu Yang's eyes flickered. Some of these medicines should be able to be bought. Is there a way to temporarily reduce her pain? Not to give her a headache? Chu Yang asked. The sword spirit hesitated and said, For the time being, there shouldn't be unless I personally use the power of my 10,000-year spirit to suppress it for her. However, it can only be suppressed for 3 months at a time. After 3 months, it needs to be suppressed again, Chu Yang said. That's best. Why don't you suppress it for her? The sword spirit rolled his eyes. Do you know that if the medicinal ingredients aren't found after 2 years, she won't be able to hold on? And if I suppress it for her at that time, I can suppress it for another 2 years. In other words, I can extend her lifespan by 2 years. And if I suppress it for her now, I can only suppress it for 2 years at the longest. After 2 years, if the medicinal ingredients aren't found, even the gods won't be able to save her. Why only 2 years? Chu Yang was puzzled. Because her lifespan is only 2 years. So I can only suppress it for 2 years. Even if I don't suppress it now, I have to leave my spirit power for when her life is extinguished 2 years later. Suppress it. In other words, after I see her, there's only 2 years left, the sword spirit said. You decide what to do. Anyway, this doesn't cost me anything. Even if I suppress it, I won't use much of my spirit power. Besides, your spirit is eternally stable now, which has also caused my spirit to be eternally stable. I don't care. You don't care, but I do. Chu Yang was conflicted. Of course, he didn't care about the spirit power. What he cared about was, if he couldn't find the medicinal ingredients in 2 years, what would he do? He sighed and couldn't make up his mind. As soon as he returned to his parents' courtyard, he was informed that his fourth uncle, Chu Fian, had come to visit. Chu Yang's spirits were lifted. Invite him in! Chu Fian sneaked in sneakily and laughed dryly. Big brother, sister-in-law, eldest nephew, you're all here. Ha ha ha! Chu Feiling frowned. Yang Rulan was dumbfounded. Fourth brother! Are you sick? Chu Feiling frowned and looked at his fourth brother with dissatisfaction. You're an old man with children. How can you be so undignified in front of the younger generation? Chu Fian nodded his head and bowed as he agreed. He thought to himself, my sins are now in your son's hands. If he says anything, I'll be beaten to a pulp. How can I still act like an elder? Big brother, sister-in-law. Shouldn't you leave for a while? Chu Fian laughed. I have something to discuss with eldest nephew, something to discuss, you know each other? Yang Rulan looked at Chu Fian suspiciously. Chu Fian immediately broke out in a cold sweat and shook his head like a rattledrum. I don't know him. If you don't know him, why are you talking to him? Yang Rulan scrutinized him. I'll talk. I'll play. Large beads of sweat dripped from Chu Fian's forehead. Can I talk to him for fun? Chu Feiling and Yang Rulan were speechless. They suddenly felt that the whole family seemed to be different since our son came back. What's going on? I'm talking to your son. It's inconvenient for the two of you to be here. Chu Fian pulled Chu Feiling and Yang Rulan out of the door. Then, he closed the door and heaved a long sigh of relief. What kind of exquisite mind does Minister Chu have? He knew at a glance that this guy didn't dare to say that he had seen him before. Well, why didn't he dare to say it? Well, he understood. The whole family had been looking for him for 18 years. He even followed him for a long time and didn't tell the family that he had seen him. Not to mention the family, if he said it, even his parents would tear him apart alive. Once he figured it out, Minister Chu immediately felt assured. At the same time, his heart suddenly brightened. Isn't this a very capable assistant? As long as... Humph, I can ask him to help me with anything. Looking at Chu Fian, who had turned his head back, Chu Yang said with a half-smile. So you're my fourth uncle. It's been a long time. Ha! Chu Fian's face turned bitter. He lowered his voice and said, Eldest nephew, I'm here to discuss something with you. Alas! This? You must help me. Chapter 744. What the hell? Chu Yang looked at Chu Fei Yen with a half-smile and crossed his legs. Fourth uncle, I'm very busy. My time is precious. Chu Fei Yen felt disgusted, but he couldn't do anything about it. He laughed dryly. Ha! Chu Yang exclaimed. Hey, I'll make tea for fourth uncle. Don't trouble yourself. Chu Fei Yen hurriedly dissuaded him. Even if this little brat put croton in the tea, he could only bear with it. How could he let him make tea? Others didn't know how powerful King of Hell Chu was, but Chu Fei Yen was in the lower three heavens. How could he not know? This was a powerful person who overturned the lower three heavens when he was only a martial arts great master. In terms of scheming, Chu Fei Yen absolutely believed that no one in the Chu clan was a match for this young man in front of him. Although this guy looked harmless, if he really opened his mouth and bit someone, even a supreme martial artist would tremble. After he modestly declined, he was startled. This bastard said that he was going to make tea, but his butt was firmly stuck on the chair. He didn't even move an inch. He couldn't help but curse in his heart, little brat. But how could he not lower his head? He laughed dryly. Nephew, you're too enthusiastic. Chu Zhang smiled gently. Third uncle, you're too polite. The two of them looked at each other and smiled at each other. The only difference was that Chu Fei Yan's smile was as bitter as Chinese gold thread, while Chu Yang's smile was as sweet as honey. Fourth uncle, what can I do for you? Minister Chu asked innocently. Chu Fei Yen shuddered and looked around. He leaned over and lowered his voice. Nephew, please don't tell me that I've seen you in the lower three heavens. Why? Chu Yang grinned and raised his eyebrows, revealing an extremely fake puzzled expression. Cough, cough, cough. Chu Fei Yen was so angry that he almost died. He looked at Chu Yang with a crooked mouth and an impulse to twitch. Bastard, you obviously know better than anyone else. But you're playing with me here. Just you wait, when I turn over a new leaf, if I don't catch you and smack your butt in the end, he swallowed his anger and swallowed his anger. He knew that since this fellow had grasped his weakness, the chances of him turning the tables on this bastard was basically zero. Fourth uncle, you should know that this nephew has just arrived in the upper three heavens. There are many things that I don't understand. I don't know the ropes. Chu Yang changed the topic of discussion. Yes, yes. Chu Fei Yen could only agree casually. He thought to himself, what is this guy thinking? Little nephew, it's difficult now. Chu Yang let out a long sigh. Chu Fei Yen was speechless. For example, I have medical skills, but there's no place for me to use them. Chu Yang lamented. Chu Fian was stunned. Medical skills, for example. I'm poor now. Chu Yang's voice was full of emotion. Fourth uncle, please be the judge. 50 white crystals and 2 blue crystals per month. What can I do with this? As for gold and silver, they're just a bunch of trash. Chu Fei Yen said in a daze. But it's always been done this way. All the direct descendants of the Chu clan are treated equally. That's why I said it's not enough. Chu Yang looked at Chu Fei Yen with disappointment. He increasingly felt that this fourth uncle of his was a little dull. Then what do you think we should do? Chu Fei Yen asked. Why didn't you say this earlier? Do you know how long I've been waiting for you to say this? Chu Yang complained in his heart. He said enthusiastically. What else can we do? Third uncle, I need your help. Let's work together to earn big money. Each of us can get 10 million purple crystals. How cool is that? Chu Fei Yan's eyes widened. 10 million purple crystals? You. You're not dreaming, right? There's so much in the upper heavens. Fourth uncle, you should know my ability. This is just a piece of cake for me. Chu Yang said confidently. What I lack now is a platform. That's all. Chu Fei Yen said. So, in the entire clan, only you can help me. Chu Yang hugged Chu Fei Yan's shoulders enthusiastically. He winked at Chu Fei Yen. Fourth uncle, will you help me? Chu Yang chuckled. Fourth uncle, you can't not help me, Chu Fei Yen felt that he had fallen into a trap. Do I dare to say that I won't help you? You fucking changed the topic. Didn't you cover it up for so long just to trap me? If I say that I won't help you, I'm sure that you'll sell me to your grandfather and father in the next moment. Then I'll be in trouble. How can I help you? Chu Fei Yen felt as if there was a mouthful of burning iron sand in his throat. It was so troublesome to speak. It's very simple. So and so. So and so. That'll do. Chu Zhang was exultant. He patted Chu Fei Yan's shoulders heavily. Fourth uncle, just wait to make a fortune. No matter what, I have to let you have some soup too, right? Chu Fei Yan's face collapsed like a bitter gourd. Alas! Chu Fei Yan sighed deeply. Although I'm a punching bag in the Chu clan, but I'm also an elder. This is the first time in my life that I've been threatened like this, fourth uncle. Chu Zhang said discontentedly. How is this threatening? We're cooperating sincerely. All right, cooperation sincerely. Chu Fei Yan was dejected. He really wanted to scold. How can cooperation be better than you, a brat, eating meat while I, as an uncle, can only drink soup? Besides, whether I can drink soup depends on whether you've found your conscience. Chu Fei Yan looked up at the sky miserably. He wanted to cry out loud, Damn it, you bastard! Every time I came back, I was scolded by your parents and beaten by your grandfather. Now that I've finally found you, I've fallen into your evil hands again. Why is my life so bitter? Where should I start? Chu Fei Yen lamented for a while and accepted his fate. To deal with external problems, one must first settle internal problems. Chu Jiang said confidently. Isn't third aunt's Lure not in good health? Let me take a look at her. Lure? Chu Fei Yen jumped up and widened his eyes. You can cure Lure? I mean, take a look. Chu Jiang looked at him discontentedly. Why are you making a fuss about nothing? Chu Fei Yen was already on the move. If you can cure Lure, I'm willing to sacrifice my life for you. As he said, he couldn't help but sigh softly. That girl is really worrying. Chu Yang looked at him quietly. He looked at his fourth uncle, who didn't seem to be scheming, but his eyes were filled with warmth and admiration. He slowly said, Fourth uncle, you are a good uncle. Chu Yang said this with sincerity. From the words, if you can cure Lure, I'm willing to sacrifice my life for you, Chu Yang felt a familial affection that he had never felt before. Only blood-related relatives would worry so much for their brother's daughter. Chu Fei Yen snorted and said, What nonsense are you spouting? If I don't even care about my own niece, then I'm worse than a beast. He paused. Then you wait here, I'll go and talk to third sister-in-law. I'll see what she thinks. As he said, he rushed out hurriedly. Chu Fei Ling and his wife, who were waiting in the courtyard outside, were guessing why their fourth brother was looking for Chu Yang. However, they saw Chu Fei Yen rush out like a gust of wind. He walked so fast that he almost knocked into Chu Fei Ling. He couldn't help but be confused. The sky was getting dark. What's wrong with him? What's wrong with him? Chu Fei Ling walked in and asked Chu Yang. Oh, it's like this. We were talking about Lure's illness. I said that I've learned some medical skills before, so fourth uncle rushed out to look for third aunt. Chu Yang made an excuse. You too. Just based on your mediocre medical skills, who can you possibly cure? You're making your third aunt happy for no reason. Yang Ruolan rebuked. Chu Fei Ling frowned. He thought of the magical elixirs that Chu Yang gave him. Who knew if they could cure Chu Lure's illness? You still have those elixirs. Chu Fei Ling's question made Yang Ruolan suddenly realize. Yes, but not much. Chu Jiang said. But those elixirs can only treat injuries, nurse the body, and increase cultivation. They have no effect on congenital illnesses. Oh, I see. Chu Fei Ling heaved a sigh of relief. Chu Yang suddenly thought of something. Father, you must keep the fact that I gave you medicine to cure grandfather a secret. Don't tell anyone that I gave it to you. Chu Fei Ling glared at him. I know better than you. Both father and son knew that if the Chu clan was peaceful, it wouldn't matter if they knew. However, now that Chu Fei Long was here, they had to be careful. If Chu Fei Long sold this information, Chu Yang would never have a day of peace. His life might even be in danger. How would Chu Fei Ling dare to take such a risk? Hurried footsteps came from outside the door. Then, Chu Fei Yen rushed in like a gust of wind with the frail Chu Lure in his arms. He rushed in too quickly, and the wind blew into Chu Lure's mouth, causing her to cough. Behind him, another white figure rushed in under the twilight. It was Chu Lure's mother, Chu Yang's third aunt, Duan Shiyi. At this moment, she looked anxious, with a hint of expectation and anxiety. Chu Yang hurriedly stood up. Third aunt. Duan Shiyi rushed over and grabbed Chu Yang's hand. Yang, can you cure Lure's illness? Chu Yang said cautiously. I've been taught medicine by an extraordinary person, so I have some attainments. However, whether I can cure her or not, I'll only know after seeing her. Then, Duan Shiyi said anxiously, why don't you take a look at Lure? Her eyes reddened as she said, Lure's illness, even the divine doctors of the Medicine Valley, said that they couldn't do anything about it. Your third uncle and I are really exhausted after all these years. Yang Ruolin held Duan Shiyi's hand and comforted her softly. Chu Yang smiled and looked at Chu Lure, who was in Chu Fei Yan's arms, and said, Come, Sister Lure, let me take a look at you. Chapter 745. Chu Lure turned her head and looked at Chu Jiang. She actually smiled quietly and said softly and slowly, "Big brother, sorry to trouble you." She struggled out of Chu Fian's arms and walked over quietly. Her expression was actually very calm. She even looked a little stupefied. At such a young age, she actually looked as if she had seen through life and death and the ways of the world. Chu Yang knew that her illness was still ongoing. In other words, she was still having a headache now. But there was no trace of pain in this strong little girl's expression. She was already used to bearing it. The reason why she came here was so that her mother wouldn't be sad or worried about her. She was only 11 years old. Chu Yang also knew that she had actually completely given up on him. The reason why she came here was just to give her mother hope. That was all. She didn't think that he could cure her. In fact, even Duan Shui didn't think that Chu Yang would be able to cure her. But now, they had really reached the point where they were desperate to try anything. Even the most powerful medicine valley couldn't do anything about this illness. Who else could cure this illness? The reason why Duan Shui brought her daughter here was probably not to cure her daughter, but to tell her, "Mother hasn't given up on you. You can't give up on yourself." Looking at Chu Lure's calm face, Chu Yang only felt his heart beating faintly. An extremely tender feeling surged up. This was his own little sister. She did not have any cultivation, nor did she have a prideful appearance. However, her determination and filial piety were enough to move anyone's heart. "Sit down," Chu Yang said warmly. Chu Lure sat down quietly and stretched out her hand. Her palm faced up and laid it flat on the table. She was extremely familiar with this set of movements. Chu Yang looked and couldn't help but feel a tug in his heart again. Chu Lure's hand was perhaps only half the thickness of the arm of a little girl of her age. She was skinny, with skin wrapped around bones. At such a young age, her skin was already wrinkled. Chu Yang took a deep breath and stretched out his finger to touch Chu Lure's wrist. In the tribulation space, a wisp of the sword spirit's consciousness entered Chu Lure's meridians through Chu Yang's finger. After a long time, "It's basically the same as what I saw last time," the sword spirit instructed. Chu Yang's heart sank, and he loosened his fingers. "How is it?" Chu Fei Yan asked nervously. Duan Shui clenched her fists and stood aside, not daring to ask. Chu Yang took a deep breath. He didn't say anything. His face was solemn. Everyone's expression immediately turned sorrowful. Almost every time, after the diagnosis of the godly doctor, they would have the same expression. Could it be? Chu Lure sat quietly at her original spot. Her face was expressionless, as if everything around her had nothing to do with her. It was as if what Chu Yang was about to talk about was also an unrelated person's illness. She said softly, "Big brother, feel free to say it. I've already heard some words hundreds of times. Don't worry, it's nothing for me to hear it again." He had heard these words hundreds of times already. Chu Yang's heart ached again. He took a deep breath. He had no choice but to repeat the sword spirit's words. "Sister Lure's illness is caused by a congenital injury. This kind of illness was very rare. Usually, if the fetus didn't die in the womb, it wouldn't live for more than 3 years after birth. But Sister Lure is already 11 years old this year. This shows how much effort third uncle and third aunt have put in all these years. You can actually tell?" Duan Shui opened her mouth wide. She looked at Chu Yang, and for the first time, her eyes were filled with hope. Chu Yang said, "This kind of illness is a very subtle brain injury. The specific symptoms are constant headaches, drowsiness, confusion in the mind, spasms all over the body, or prolonged coma. The most painful part is cramping from the head to the shoulders, along the spine to the soles of the feet. It can even cause the whole body to curl up into a ball. This kind of feeling is even more unbearable than the cruelest torture in the world." Chu Lure stared at Chu Yang. Tears slowly slid down her cheeks and dripped down. Duan Shui covered her face with her hands. These were tears of pain, but also tears of hope. After so many years, this was the first time that someone had said it clearly after taking her pulse. At least, before this, no one else had said that. The most severe part is cramping from the head to the shoulders, along the spine to the soles of the feet. Duan Shui was the one who understood this the best. Every time her daughter's illness acted up, she would hug her daughter tightly in her arms and feel her daughter's body twitching in vain. She could even see her daughter's tendons slowly bulging out, squirming and twisting at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then, her daughter's body would completely change shape, and her heart would also be throbbing and breaking at that moment. "Can it be treated?" Chu Fian asked anxiously. "Treated?" Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, "It's very difficult to treat. Very difficult to treat." Chu Feiling, Chu Fian, Yang Ruolin and Duan Shui all shouted at the same time. Even Chu Lur, who was already disheartened, raised her head in a daze. Her eyes shone brightly as she looked at Chu Yang. Her dry, bloodless lips also began to tremble slightly. Very difficult to treat. What did that mean? Very difficult to treat, that meant it could still be treated. Although it was difficult, there was still hope. In the past, all the doctors, including the divine doctors from the Medicine Valley, would simply say that it couldn't be treated, or that it was incurable, and there was no way to treat it. At most, only the high priest of the Medicine Valley gave a prescription to prolong one's life, which required a large amount of elixirs. He pointed out that as long as one had any of the elixirs in this prescription, one could prolong one's life. But at the same time, he pointed out that it could only prolong one's life until the age of 13. It was absolutely hopeless to cure it completely. Even if all the prescriptions were found, it would be useless. There was absolutely no one in the world who could treat this illness. For so many years, Chu Feian and Duan Shui had almost abandoned everything for their daughter. Chu Feian had tried his best to gather information from the outside, to earn purple crystals, and to collect herbs in places where no one dared to go, or where even martial saints did not dare to go. Even the entire Chu clan had almost emptied all the purple crystals in their storage for Chu Lur's illness. But in the face of the expensive elixirs in the prescription, it was still a drop in the bucket. Because that prescription was simply a prescription that would cause one to despair. Other than dozens of spiritual treasures, all the rare elixirs in the heavenly level continent were listed. With such a prescription, not to mention the Chu clan, even one of the dominant clans, would go bankrupt. Moreover, it could only prolong one's life, but not cure it completely. So in the end, Chu Feian rejected the clan's help and left alone to search for elixirs for his daughter. Until now, he had only found less than 10 elixirs in the hundreds of prescriptions. Although the couple had already made up their mind that even if the elixirs they collected could only prolong their daughter's life by 1 day, they would still put in all their effort. Even if she could only prolong her life by 2 hours, they had to keep her alive for 2 hours. But if the entire Chu clan was implicated and declined, it was a responsibility that the couple could not bear. Now, Chu Yang said that it was very difficult to treat. Difficult meant that it could be treated. Duan Shui cried tears of joy. The oil lamp on the table jumped, and a cluster of lights burst out. Chu Yang walked over slowly and closed the door. Turning around, he walked to the table and sat down. He said in a low voice, "There are no outsiders here, so I'll be direct. Third aunt Sister Lur's illness is very troublesome. Currently, I don't have any elixirs with me. This is the first reason. The second reason: Sister Lur's illness can only prolong her life for another 2 years." When this sentence was said, everyone was shocked to the extreme. They couldn't help but believe that Chu Yang really had the ability to cure Chu Lur. Because this illness could only prolong her life until she was 13 years old. Only the high priest of the Medicine Valley had said this before. And this sentence was the Chu clan's top secret. Outsiders never knew. But now, Chu Yang said it out loud. "What's the third reason?" Duan Shui asked in a trembling voice. "The third reason? There are 2 possibilities. That is to say, while we search for those elixirs in these 2 years, If we can't find them in these 2 years, I'm still confident that I can prolong Sister Lure's life for another 2 years. We'll have more time to search for those elixirs, Chu Yang said. When this sentence was said, Duan Shui's tears flowed down. Prolong her life for another 2 years. That's great, that's great. Suddenly, she covered her face and started to cry. To Duan Shui, her daughter could only live until she was 13 years old. This was a heavy blow, like a curse. Every time she heard the word 13, Duan Shui couldn't help but go crazy. But now, she actually heard that not only was there hope, but that if she couldn't find the elixirs before she was 13 years old, she could prolong her life for another 2 years to wait for the elixirs. To Duan Shui, this was practically music to her ears. However, there was a sorrowful expression on Chu Lure's face. Her delicate little face seemed to have turned black at this moment. She clearly knew what prolong her life for another 2 years meant. This meant that she would have to endure this pain day and night for another 2 years. The little girl bit her lip, her eyes complicated. She had been tortured by her illness for a long time. Her mind was no longer comparable to that of an ordinary 11-year-old girl. She looked at Chu Yang with a conflicted expression, then looked at her mother who was crying tears of joy. She couldn't help but clench her hands tightly. For mother and father's sake, I'll endure it for another 2 years. So what? Isn't it just pain? I've already endured this pain for 11 years. What's 2 more years? Besides, she really couldn't bear to leave her mother and her home. You said that there are 2 possibilities. What's the second one? Chu Fian asked hurriedly. The second possibility is, I can treat Sister Lure now so that she won't feel any pain for 3 months. This means that I can temporarily suppress her illness. I can let her be like a normal child. She won't feel sleepy, cramps or headaches anymore, Chu Yang said solemnly. As everyone listened, they widened their eyes and opened their mouths in shock and ecstasy. But I can only suppress it for 2 years, Chu Yang continued solemnly. And after 2 years, if I can't find all the required elixirs, then I can't do anything about it. This means that I can't prolong her life for another 2 years. Chapter 746. Everyone was stunned. Chu Fian swayed dizzily and sat on the ground. He was dumbfounded and didn't speak for a long time. This is a difficult choice. Chu Yang took a deep breath. So, I don't dare to make the decision myself. I need Third Aunt to make a decision. Everyone understood that only the child's mother, Duan Shui, could make such a decision. No one else had the right to do so. It was reasonable for Chu Yang to kick him out. There was nothing wrong with that. But everyone was still speechless. If she didn't want to suffer for the next 2 years, she had to give up the chance to extend her life for the next 2 years. If she wanted to extend her life for the next 2 years, it was impossible to reduce the pain for the next 2 years. Duan Shui bit her lips painfully. Her daughter had been in pain for 11 years. How could she let go of this rare opportunity? But if she chose to live without pain for the next 2 years, what if the elixirs couldn't be found? The elixirs were hard to find. Everyone had personally experienced it these few years. Who was so confident that they could find all the elixirs within 2 years? But if she gave up the next 2 years, what if the elixirs were found soon after the child died? Wouldn't she regret it for the rest of her life? This choice was truly a dilemma. Everyone was silent at the same time. Chu Feiling frowned. Yang Rulin's face was solemn. Putting themselves in their shoes, if their child was in such a situation and they had to make a choice, the couple would not dare to make a decision rashly. This wasn't a choice, it was a dilemma. Chu Fian, who had always been the most enthusiastic, held his breath at this moment. He didn't even dare to cough. Duan Shui's face was full of contradictions and pain. She opened her mouth and closed it again. She didn't know what to do. Chu Lure watched from the side. After a long time, she suddenly plucked up her courage and said, "Big brother, can I choose?" Chu Yang was stunned. He said, "Lure, of course you can choose." Chu Lure pouted and stuck out her little tongue to lick her lips nervously. She turned to look at her mother, her eyes full of longing. She turned back and said resolutely, "Big brother, I want to live for 2 more years. Even if there's no hope, even if it's painful. I want to live to 15 years old." Chu Yang was stunned. Not only Chu Yang, but also Chu Feiling, Yang Ruolin and Chu Fian were stunned. "Why?" Chu Yang asked in surprise. Everyone thought that this girl would definitely choose to live without pain for 2 years. He would never have thought that she would choose to live for 2 more years. Endure the extreme pain and live for another 2 years. "I want to accompany my mother and father." Chu Luo lowered her eyelashes and said sadly, "They can't bear to part with me, and I can't bear to part with them either. My parents are too pitiful. Ever since I was able to remember things, I've never seen them smile because of me, even if it hurts more. I want to accompany them for 2 more years. Big brother, you don't know this. When I'm in pain, my mother hugs me and I don't feel any pain anymore." "Really?" Chu Lur said seriously. "I'm afraid that my mother will be sad and my father will be sad." She paused and turned to look at her mother affectionately. "Even if it's just delaying their sadness by 2 years, it's still good. I'll be very strong. I promise I won't scream when it hurts." "Lur!" Duan Shui let out a heart-wrenching cry. Chu Feiling's eyes were wet and he sighed deeply. Yang Ruolin's tears had already flowed down. Chu Fian sniffled and took deep breaths. He kept blinking and not letting his tears fall. He kept muttering, "Good child. Good child." Chu Jiang also almost shed tears. Everyone knew that the pain that Chu Lur was enduring now was really worse than death. Every day that passed was another day of torture. Every 2 hours that passed was another 2 hours of pain. But this strong little girl resolutely chose to endure this pain that was 10 times worse than purgatory for 2 more years so that her parents wouldn't be sad. Chu Yang's heart began to tremble. "No!" Duan Shui suddenly raised her head with tears all over her face. "I want Lur to live without pain for 2 more years." "Ah?" Chu Yang, Yang Ruolin, Chu Feiling and Chu Fian exclaimed at the same time. Duan Shui hugged her daughter in her arms. Her voice trembled as she said, "Ever since Lur was born, she has never experienced what it feels like to live without pain. She has never had fun and never been happy. All the things that other children have are very normal. She has been in this world for 11 years, but she has never enjoyed even a little bit of it. Since there's this chance to let her live without pain for 2 years, then I have to satisfy her no matter what. It's good if we can find the medicine in 2 years. If we can't find it, Duan Shui's tears streamed down. If we can't find it, I'll let my daughter have 2 years of happiness, in her limited lifespan of 13 years. She grinned miserably. If we can find it, 2 years is about enough. If we can't find it, even if we have 200 years, it will be in vain. That's fate. I only hope that no matter if my daughter is born or not, there will be days when she is free of illness and pain. Even if I can't find the medicine 2 years later, my daughter will still have 2 years of happiness. 2 years of no pain." Everyone was moved. There's actually such a mother and daughter in this world. Mother. Chu Lur's tears streamed down. She stuffed her small head into her mother's arms. Her 2 thin and weak arms wrapped tightly around her mother's waist. She started to sob softly. "That's good." Chu Yang took a deep breath. He only felt that his eyes were wet and hot. He said, "That's right. Third Aunt Lur, I only have one request." Duan Shui asked. "What request?" "This matter has nothing to do with me. That means, no matter who asks, don't say that I did it," Qi Zhang said seriously. "I understand." Duan Shui sized up her nephew who had just arrived. There was understanding in her eyes, but more than that, there was some praise. It seemed that this nephew's intelligence far exceeded that of his peers. He was even more careful in his actions. It seemed that the Chu clan had hope. Since he was so careful in his actions, then he must have some confidence in Lur's matter. Fourth uncle, there's only 2 years, Chu Yang said. You have to help me find the medicine. Chu Fian nodded vigorously. Of course. Even if I have to sacrifice my life, I must find the medicine for Lur. Why is it only your fourth uncle? Are your mother and I just decorations? Chu Feiling said unhappily. Yes. I misspoke. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. He nodded and bowed, apologizing to the old master first. Then, he took out a piece of paper and a brush and wrote on it. After a while, he said, These are the 8 medicinal herbs needed to treat Lur. Every single one of them had to be found within 2 years. Furthermore, it had to be found within 23 months from now. Give me a month's time to prepare the medicine. Everyone came forward. Then, there was a series of uniform gasps. Absolute vine, colored lotus, single flower, jade petal, lingji, life pangolin, lifeless water, heavenly jade elixir, earthine soul ginseng. The 4 adults were stunned. These medicines were for treating Lur's illness. If these medicines were gathered together, they could corrode the ground under the Chu clan by 3,000 feet. Have you memorized them? Chu Yang said lightly. Yes, Chu Fian muttered, concentrating on memorizing. Among everyone present, he was the one who knew King of Hell Chu the best. Since King of Hell Chu said that he could treat Lur, then he could. If King of Hell Chu said that these medicines were effective, then they were effective. On this point, he had more confidence in Chu Yang than Chu Feiling did. Yes. Chu Yang put this piece of paper on the lamp. The flame rolled out, and the paper started to burn. It slowly burned to ashes. Chu Yang threw it on the ground and crushed the ashes with his foot. There was no need to say anything else. Chu Yang's action had already explained everything. This prescription must not be leaked out. The medicinal herbs needed must not be known to outsiders except for the few people present today. Everyone's faces became serious. Lur, follow me to the inner chamber, Chu Yang said. Father, mother, wait outside with fourth uncle and third aunt. No matter how long it takes, don't let anyone disturb us. Yes. The 4 of them agreed at the same time. Yang. I'm counting on you. Duan Shui looked at Chu Yang with a pleading face. She looked at her daughter with concern. Third aunt, don't worry. When we come out, I promise to return you a healthy daughter. Chu Yang smiled and made a small joke to ease the tense atmosphere. Yes. I believe you. Duan Shui nodded vigorously. Chu Lur kept looking back as Chu Yang pulled her into the inner chamber. Duan Shui looked at the entrance of the inner chamber in a daze. Her hands reached forward as if she wanted to grab something. She finally sat down and muttered to herself nervously. Will it work? It will work, right? It will definitely work. Don't worry, it will be fine. It will work. Yang Rulin grabbed her hand and patted it gently to comfort her. Duan Shui was like a drowning person suddenly grabbing onto a piece of driftwood. She grabbed Yang Rulin's hand tightly and said with tears in her eyes, Sister-in-law, I'm counting on you now. I really didn't expect Yan Yang to have learned such earth-shattering skills after being outside for so many years. Yang Ruolan knew that she shouldn't be proud at this moment. But she still felt proud. And she also felt the same way about Duan Shui's misery. So she sighed. Then she said in a somewhat proud and perturbed manner, Don't worry. Yan Yang is still young. But she's very steady in her actions. She won't speak without thinking. Since he said he can treat it, he will definitely be able to treat it. Duan Shui nodded repeatedly. Yes. She grabbed Yang Rulin's hand and didn't let go. Sister-in-law, this is my last hope. You know what kind of life I've been living all these years. Chapter 747. Although Chu Feiling and his wife had lost their child, they could still forget about her when they didn't see each other or when they were busy. They had hope in their hearts. As long as they found her, their child would be fine and there would always be hope in their hearts. On the other hand, the third brother and his wife stayed by their daughter's side all the time. They saw their daughter's pain, her convulsions and her suffering, but they couldn't do anything about it. They knew that it was hopeless, but they still stayed by her side. They were like criminals on death row who knew when they would be beheaded. They were waiting for that day in vain, but they couldn't do anything about it. No, they were even worse off than criminals on death row. Because they still had to work hard, desperately accumulate all their wealth, desperately use all their means to stop this death that they knew was unstoppable. Parents in the world had a pitiful heart. Chu Feiyan and Duan Shui used their lives, souls, and all their hard work to realize this sentence, even if it meant that their child could live for another 15 minutes. They were still willing to give up everything. Now, Duan Shui was accompanying her child at home, heartbroken, while Chu Feiyan was still frantically searching for her in some unknown mountain. Yang Ruolin and Duan Shui sighed at each other. If you are not a parent, you will not know the hardships of raising a child. If you are not a parent, you will not know the kindness of a parent. In this world, who knew how many parents like this? Who knew how many more were there? Chu Yang brought Chu Lur into the inner chamber. He smiled and pointed to the bed. Lur, be good. Lie down on the bed. I'll treat your illness. You'll be fine in a while. Chu Lur tilted her head and looked at him. She actually smiled gently. Big brother, although I'm young, you don't have to coax me like a child. Chu Yang was stunned. Huh! Chu Lur revealed a look of arrogance between her brows. At this moment, this thin and weak body actually revealed its sharpness. She smiled faintly and said, Big brother, ever since I could feel pain, I've been going back and forth in the 18 levels of hell every day. She raised her eyebrows and smiled sadly but proudly. In this world, I'm probably the only one who can survive like me, right? Chu Yang looked at her deeply and said, That's right, Le. In terms of strength, you're the strongest I've ever seen. He added another sentence in his heart. Even if you include the seniors, you are still the one and only. Chu Lur smiled. Big brother, I was able to survive because firstly, I couldn't leave father and mother. The moment I thought of leaving them forever, I trained myself with all my might, endured the pain with all my might, and accepted the cruelest treatment and pain with all my might. Just so that, when I'm done with the pain, I can tell my mother, Mother, I'm not in pain anymore. At that time, a smile appeared on Mother's face. Although it's bleak, every time I see it, I feel very happy. The pain is worth it. Also, when my mother hugged me, the warm smell of her body made me drunk. This was the second. Therefore, even though I knew that every day I lived was another day of torture for my mother and myself, I still couldn't bear to die. Because I'm afraid. I've heard that the world is dark and cold. There's no one to accompany you, and you're all alone. So I'm afraid. I don't dare to go. Big brother, don't you think I'm very selfish? Chu Mo Lur sat down leisurely in front of Chu Yang. Her frail back was actually very straight. His eyes, which were originally lifeless, were now shining brightly. You're not selfish. Chu Yang's throat moved a little. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva. After organizing his words in his mind for a long time, he said slowly, You're not selfish. Third uncle and third aunt have given up everything for you, just so that you can live on. You're right. Every day you live is a day of torture for them. But as long as you're alive, they'll feel motivated to work hard for you. If you give up and die, third uncle and third aunt indeed won't have to endure such torture in the future. But the pain you leave behind will torment their own generation. Because you should have lived to 13 years old, but you didn't. They'll feel that they've let you down. Remember, Lur, only this kind of inner guilt is the greatest torture in a person's life. After Chu Yang said this deeply, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Qin Wu. If not for the guilt from my previous life, how could I be like this in this life? Big brother, what you said is really good. Chu Lur clearly became more cheerful after hearing these words. She actually smiled sincerely and said, I've always felt that I'm very selfish and also very guilty. Does this mean that I'm not? No, but even so, your strength has made up for everything. Chu Yang said deeply. You have to know that you were injured in your mother's womb. Third uncle and third aunt already feel that they owe you. If you continue, won't they really be in so much pain that they wish they were dead? Chulur's thin eyebrows furrowed. After thinking hard for a long time, she finally stood up quietly and bowed deeply to Chu Yang. She said, "Big brother, thank you." She raised her head and looked at Chu Yang. Her eyes were clear and bright. She said, "Big brother, do you know that in such a family, with parents, uncles, big brother, and now you, it's really very blissful. Such a family, even if it's poor, even if it makes me feel 1,000 times or 10,000 times the pain now, I can't bear to leave." Chulur said. Chu Yang's heart ached. He said gently, "Lur, I promise that you'll never leave." Chulur said with tears in her eyes, "Big brother, treat my injuries." With tears in her eyes, she smiled mischievously. "I didn't believe that you could treat me at first, but now, I believe you." Chu Yang smiled and scratched her nose. He scolded, "Little rascal." Chulur giggled. Chu Yang realized that once this little girl smiled sincerely, there was actually a different charm to her. Her eyebrows first moved a little, and then the bridge of her nose wrinkled up slightly. At the same time, her lips curled up slightly, like spring flowers blooming. As Chu Yang instructed the sword spirit to prepare, he said sincerely, "Lur, you'll definitely be a great beauty when you grow up. I don't know how many people will be charmed by you." Chulur held her hands in front of her chest and said happily, "Really? Really?" Chu Yang nodded affirmatively. And at this time, the sword spirit had also finished the preparations. Chu Yang helped Chulur to lie down on his bed slowly. He smiled and asked, "Just now you mentioned your pillars. I wonder if there's a third pillar?" Chu Yang was originally joking, but after he said that, Chulur actually sat up straight and said seriously, "Yes. Big brother, the third pillar is that I feel that I'm the most amazing person in the world." She smiled proudly, with a sense of disdain for the heavens and the pride of looking down on all the men in the world. She raised her little neck slightly and said, "Every day, I walk back and forth in the land of hell from the 1st to the 18th level. Every time I walk, I'll be tortured once. I've been like this for 11 years and 2 months, and I've been hanging for 18 hours every day for 3 days. Chu Yang couldn't help but be shocked. She remembered it so clearly. Chulur smiled and said, "Big brother, I was born in the wee hours of the morning. I remember my birthday well. I want to know how long I can bear it. But no matter how long I can bear it, I'm afraid there's no one in history who can bear the pain like me. Even a supreme martial artist can't do it. This is my greatest pride. Although it's painful, I'm filled with a sense of accomplishment. It's this pride and sense of accomplishment that supports me to bear it day by day. As long as the heavens don't take me away by force, I'll continue to bear it day by day. Big brother. I'm actually very proud." Chulur smiled lightly and lay back. She even stretched. "It's so comfortable. Big brother, your bed is even softer than mine." Chu Yang looked at her in a daze. He faintly felt that if his sister was really cured, she would definitely become a terrifying figure in the world of the heavens in the future. Not for anything else, but for this tenacity. She was only 11 years old, but not only was she strong, she was also tenacious. The rarest thing was that in such a place of torture that was crueler than hell, she could actually still find happiness and a sense of accomplishment. This was already an inconceivable matter. And on the basis of all this, she could still reflect on herself and look down on the world. She already had all the conditions to become a peerless expert, and had far surpassed them. Once her chronic illness was cured, she would be a hidden dragon rising to the heavens. No one would be able to stop her from advancing. In the space of the tribulation, the sword spirit looked at Chulur quietly and said solemnly, "Chu Yang, do you know that when she was talking to you, her condition was gradually worsening? Her head was hurting more and more. Did you see that?" Chu Yang took a breath. "No." The sword spirit nodded and made a clear conclusion. "Chu Yang, your sister is the most terrifying person among all the people I've seen in the past 10,000 years. Only then did Chu Yang exhale the breath that he had just taken in. He said quietly, "I'm proud of her." The two of them didn't talk any more nonsense. Chu Yang stood quietly and held Chu Le's wrist. Somehow, there seemed to be a shadow that came out of his body and entered Chu Le's body through the meridians on her wrist. Then, extremely carefully, it climbed up to the position of her brain. It disappeared. Chu Le moaned in pain and lost all consciousness. Outside, Duan Shi's eyes were fixed on the door of the inner chamber. She was restless. The two brothers, Chu Feiling and Chu Fian, sat opposite each other. It was as if there were nails under their buttocks. After sitting for a while, they would get up and walk around with their hands behind their backs. Or they would simply go out and patrol around the room before coming back in. The four of them didn't even dare to speak. Inside, Chu Yang seemed to be talking to Chu Le, but their voices were muffled. Even if they used their martial arts, they couldn't hear what they were saying. This was the sword spirit's doing. With the sword spirit's cultivation, as long as he didn't want anyone to hear something, even a supreme martial artist could only stare helplessly. But if he wanted someone to hear it, even if they covered their ears or became deaf, they would still be able to hear it clearly. The four of them listened for a long time but couldn't hear anything. They were all very surprised. They were clearly talking, but at such a close distance, even a monarch-level expert could only hear muffled words. This was unbelievable. After a long time, they suddenly heard a soft chuckle from inside. Although the sound was soft and inaudible, it could be heard clearly. Chapter 748. Although this voice was soft, it was indeed Chu Le's voice. Furthermore, there was no pain in her laughter. It was filled with joy from the bottom of her heart. This was a joyous laughter that couldn't be faked at all. Duan Shi's entire body was trembling. Her tears were falling like rain. She had forgotten her feelings and grabbed Yang Ruolan's hand. She had used so much strength that it hurt Yang Ruolan's hand. She repeatedly said, "Sister-in-law, did you hear that? Did you hear that? It's Lur." Lur smiled. Lur smiled. Yang Ruolan was also excited. She muttered, It's Lur." Duan Shi sobbed and couldn't form a sound. Lur has never smiled like this in the past 11 years. Today, she actually smiled. She smiled so happily. "Sister-in-law, I'm really satisfied to be able to hear such a laugh in my life. I'm so happy." As she spoke, she couldn't stop her tears from falling. She said, "If Fayin could hear it, I believe that even if he's in the 100,000 mountains, he'd be gratified and happy." Chu Feiling's expression dimmed. He couldn't help but feel sad when he thought of how his third brother was still wandering around some barren mountain surrounded by clouds. The continuous clouds, the sky-reaching mountains, the dangerous valleys, the ferocious beasts, and the unpredictable human heart. Over the past 11 years, it didn't dispel his third brother's determination to seek medicine for his daughter. I wonder where third brother is at this moment. But he was still in the misty mountain range, searching for that illusory hope that was destined to be extinguished. The young child who followed behind him and called him Big Brother back then had now grown into an indomitable man. Even though this process was so bitter and bitter. When everyone heard this laughter, it was as if they had heard the sound of nature. Everyone's eyes were a little red and their minds were a little dazed. For so many years, they had waited for such a laugh. How long had they waited? How much had they sacrificed for this laugh? Everyone stood there in a daze, deep in thought. Only Duan Shi's soft sobs could be heard in the room. She was still holding Yang Ruolan's hand. Her body was so weak that she almost fainted. "Sister-in-law, Yang can make Lur laugh like that. I'm willing to do anything for him." Yang Ruolan sighed deeply. She didn't know what to say. She only felt that her throat was blocked. So, she held Yang Ruolan's hand tightly. In the inner chamber, Chu Yang's mind was tightly connected with the sword spirit. It was as if he could see it. The sword spirit first entered Chu Le's meridians and then followed her meridians to a pitch-black space. To Chu Yang's surprise, this space was brimming with vitality. The sword spirit sighed. This little girl's strength can be seen at this moment. Even a perfectly healthy person might not have such vitality. However, this vitality is like water without roots. Then, the sword spirit stretched out his hand. When his two hands reached out of his sleeves, they transformed into thousands of rays of golden light. It was as if a heavenly deity had suddenly descended. Then, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He raised both his hands at the same time and made complicated gestures. Following his gestures, lightning flashed and thunder roared in the entire space. Rays of golden light shot out and disappeared into the corners of this space without a trace. Chu Yang counted carefully. A total of 81 rays of golden light shot out from the sword spirit's hands. Then, it suddenly descended. It was as if a faint shadow had suddenly formed in this space. Then, it suddenly disintegrated and turned into rays of milky white light. They penetrated this space and entered Chu Le's brain. Then, one could clearly see that this milky white light was suppressing bits and pieces of pitch-black matter. They separated from Chu Le's brain and formed a black cloud. The white light suppressed the black cloud and entered her meridians. It gathered the bits and pieces of black matter in her meridians bit by bit and tried its best to suppress them downwards. Its speed became slower and slower. The sword spirit once again made complicated gestures. Then, another ray of white light exploded and entered her meridians. It formed a new force and suppressed the black cloud downwards. This happened 3 times in a row. Only then did all the bits and pieces of black matter were suppressed into a ball and placed into Chu Le's dantian. The white light enveloped her layer by layer and remained stable. The sword spirit heaved a long sigh and said, "Chu Yang, this sister of yours." He suddenly stopped and changed the topic. "After 3 months, you must suppress her again at the same time. Otherwise, once it recoils, the pain will be 10 times more painful than before." Chu Yang nodded solemnly. "I will remember this and not delay it." The sword spirit revealed a tired look and said, "That's good. Although I could tell that this little girl's condition was bad, I didn't expect it to be so serious. The original plan was to suppress it once, but it actually happened 3 times. What exactly is this?" Chu Yang asked. "It's actually so domineering? This is a congenital illness. Or to put it more deeply, you don't understand. In the human body, other than the meridians, veins, bones, skin and flesh, there's an even more subtle component. Our heaven's continent hasn't recognized this component yet. But it's these parts that are the most important," the sword spirit said. "It's these parts that really control the joy and pain of the human body. The pain from being beaten, the anger from being scolded, the sadness from being sad, the sense of taste and so on, are all controlled by this part. And Lure is injured in these parts." Chu Yang said in shock, "There's such a thing?" The sword spirit smiled. "The human body is a universe of its own. It's all-encompassing. Not to mention this, there are many more subtle and more important things than these that haven't been discovered yet. If all of them are discovered, even if an ordinary person can reach the cultivation level of a second-grade supreme martial artist, or even higher in a day, I wouldn't be surprised. The world is obsessed with finding treasures and reaping without sowing, but they don't know that the greatest treasure in a person's life is his own body. For hundreds of thousands of years, countless people in the heavens continent have lived in this treasure house, but they haven't touched it at all. They've been poor all their lives. It's really sad and lamentable." The sword spirit sighed deeply. Chu Yang frowned and pondered. "Lure's illness is congenital. Congenital can make people achieve glory, but can also make people sink into misery. Usually, this kind of thing." The sword spirit pointed to the black spot in Chu Le's dantian and said, "We call it poison of heaven and earth." "Poison of heaven and earth," Chu Yang murmured, as if he had thought of something. The sword spirit didn't waste any more time. He transformed out of Chu Le's body and returned to Chu Yang's sea of consciousness. He said, "I need to rest for a while. Once Chu Le recovers, her talent will be very heaven-defying." Although she started late, she'll definitely become a terrifying figure in the future. Or maybe she'll be of great help to you. Chu Yang smiled faintly. Sword Spirit, you've underestimated me. Lure is my younger sister. If she doesn't have any great ambitions, I'd rather she live a peaceful and happy life. I'd rather she live an ordinary but happy life. But if she has the desire to become a strong person, I'll naturally pave the way for her. But as for whether she'll be of help to me, I'm not so low as to use my sister. The Sword Spirit didn't answer. He had already entered a deep state of recuperation. Chu Yang pushed the door open and walked out. Chu Feiling, Yang Ruolin and Chu Fian, who had been waiting anxiously for a long time, immediately surrounded him when they saw him coming out. How is it? This was Chu Feiling. Is it done? This was Yang Ruolin. Why didn't Lure come out? This was Chu Fian. Only Duan Shuyi was a little timid. She stood where she was, looking at Chu Yang closely. She wanted to hear what Chu Yang had to say, but she was also afraid of what Chu Yang would say. She didn't dare to step forward. Fortunately, I didn't disappoint you. Chu Yang chuckled. His first sentence made everyone happy. Lure shouldn't feel any pain for the next 3 months. That's great. Chu Feiling and the other two clapped their hands excitedly. Duan Shui let out a choked moan. Her body swayed and she almost fell down. Yang Ruolin was quick to react. She hurriedly caught her. Lure is asleep, Chu Yang said. Third aunt, go in and take a look. She's fine now. Duan Shui nodded emotionally. She wanted to take a step forward, but she felt that her legs were soft and didn't listen to her. Yang Ruolin had to support her before she walked in. Although Duan Shui's cultivation wasn't considered high in the Chu clan, she was still a disciple of a famous teacher. She also had the cultivation of a martial emperor. Now that she was so weak, it could be seen how intense her heart was. Inside the room, Chu Lure was lying quietly on Chu Yang's bed. Her two thin and pitiful arms were crossed on her lower abdomen. Her small head was slightly tilted as she rested her head on the pillow. Her face was glowing with a long-lost blush. Her long eyelashes covered her eyelids like small fans. Her small lips would occasionally move slightly, and the corners of her mouth would curl up. It seemed that even in her sleep, she also felt this relaxed and happy feeling that she had never tasted before. She was smiling happily. Duan Shui stared blankly at her daughter who was sleeping soundly. Her eyes slowly filled with tears. Her daughter was already 11 years old, and this was the first time she had ever seen her daughter's face. Her body slowly softened until she knelt in front of the bed. She was full of gratitude and joy. She gently placed her head on the bed. She looked at her daughter without blinking and covered her mouth with her hands. Chu Yang and the others quietly left. In the living room, the fragrance of tea rose in spirals. Yang Ruolin had rebrewed tea for the three of them to soothe their throats. Everyone knew that Chu Lure's crisis had passed temporarily. From now on, it was time to compete. Medicine. This was the key thing. The time was very short. Only 2 years. Chapter 749. Chu Fian frowned. This medicine. Our clan only has one type of absolute vine. This is the only type that my third brother stole from the 100,000 mountains 5 years ago. He almost lost his life because of it. We don't have the other 7 types. Chu Yang raised his eyebrows. Even if we don't have it, other clans don't have it? We don't know if other clans have it or not. Chu Feiling frowned. But even if other clans have it, isn't this medicine also very expensive? And there's no market for it. Besides our Chu clan, there are 2 other big clans in the flat mountain ridge. The other small clans can be ignored. But these 2 clans have always been fighting openly and secretly with our Chu clan. How would they be willing to sell such precious medicine to us? That's right. Right now, the flames of war are everywhere in the heavenly realm. Chaos is everywhere. It seems that a great chaos is about to erupt. At such a time, poisons that harm people are more popular than life-saving medicines. Yang, you've just arrived in the upper three heavens and don't understand the situation. Don't think of everything too simply. Chu Yang said innocently. I didn't think of it that simply. Don't tell me that there aren't any big businesses, auctions or organizations that collect remuneration in this flat mountain ridge? We don't have access to these channels. Plus, we'll collect by ourselves. 2 years is enough. Chu Fian smiled bitterly. 2 years is enough? I really don't know how you came to this conclusion. Even if there are, how can our Chu clan take out so many purple crystals to buy it? Not to mention that second brother is a little stingy in managing the household. Even if second brother isn't stingy, the Chu clan can't afford such wealth. Yang Rulan nodded. These things can't be bought with white or blue crystals. Chu Feiling was thinking about another issue. This place belongs to the Shao clan. The big businesses and auctions are all controlled by the Shao clan. Furthermore, the organizations and individuals that you speak of are all under the control of the Dharma Wielders Organization. The Law Enforcers Organization has blood payers in the entire upper three heavens. As long as there are enough purple crystals, they can post tasks. Then, all the blood payers in the high heavens will see it. Those who are interested will take the task. In exchange for remuneration. Blood payer? Chu Yang asked with interest. What is a blood payer? The predecessor of blood payers was a punishment method set up by the law enforcers. That was to put up a bounty for those who committed heinous crimes in the heavenly layer, and set a time limit to kill them, allowing all the experts in the heavenly layer to hunt them down, and then reward those who succeeded. Because each of these rewards can only be exchanged with a bloody human life, they are called blood payers. But over time, people discovered that not only could this form kill people, but it could also do other things. For example, seeking revenge, finding medicine, killing people, bodyguards, escorting, and so on. As a result, the enforcers of the law specially set up the blood payer group to be in charge of this area. As for the warriors of the Great Boo continent, many of them are unwilling to live under someone else's roof, but they don't have the strength to start their own business, so they become blood payers. They relied on getting paid to live their lives. Over time, more and more people like this appeared, which led to the current situation. Basically, blood payers are free to do whatever they want. They don't want to be under anyone's jurisdiction. If they don't want to do something, they don't do it. However, most of them are still very hardworking. Chu Fian continued. Isn't this nonsense? Chu Feiling looked at his younger brother gloomily. If they don't do anything, what do they eat? Drink? What do they use for cultivation? You must know that blood payers' missions start with black crystals, and most of them are made with purple crystals. And one purple crystal is enough to support an emperor-level expert for half a month with double cultivation. How can they not work hard and risk their lives? Chu Fian shrank his neck. I knew that I would be reprimanded if I spoke to you since I was young. There's such a fun group. Minister Chu's eyes suddenly lit up like light bulbs. Fun? Yang Rulan knocked on her son's head. This is a matter of life and death, and you say it's fun? Chu Fian twitched his mouth and thought, Big sister-in-law, you don't know, the so-called human lives are just fun in the eyes of this minister, that's all. Although your son is young, the blood on his tender hands is probably 100 times more than the blood on the entire Chu clan. You still think that he's an obedient child. But no matter which channel you use, you need purple crystals. And a lot of purple crystals. Chu Feiling said seriously. After all, isn't it just a matter of purple crystals? Chu Yang smiled disapprovingly. It's still very easy for me to earn some purple crystals in a short period of time. Moreover, I have the help of third uncle. Chu Fian's face suddenly wrinkled like a dried bitter gourd. Damn it, can't you not emphasize this matter? My heart trembles every time you emphasize it. Very easy? Chu Feiling felt that he needed to correct his son's point of view. How can purple crystals be so easy? Now that a piece of purple crystal has appeared, it can cause many people to fight for it. Do you think that purple crystals are common goods? Don't think that purple crystals are everywhere just because you have a piece of purple crystal jade essence hanging on your neck. I don't think that purple crystals are common goods. I'm just saying, with my current medical skills, I should be able to make a lot of money by opening a medical center, Chu Yang said calmly. You! Chu Feiling snorted. Do you think that you can do whatever you want just because you have good medical skills? Opening a business is about being smooth and slick. Anything unexpected might cause you to be unable to move forward. You'll go bankrupt. Do you think that it's enough just because you have good medical skills? You're far from it. Do you think you can imagine all the scheming of the evil spirits? Big brother, you're too serious. With me there to help Yang, there shouldn't be any problems. Chu Fian smiled bitterly and tried to persuade him. He thought to himself, schemes and schemes? This is what your son is least afraid of. This young master is the master of schemes and schemes. Besides, if Yang goes out to do things by himself, he can also avoid conflict with second brother. Chu Fian said meaningfully. Chu Feiling and Yang Ruolin suddenly understood and looked at Chu Yang with a guilty look. Yang Ruolin said in a low voice, Yang, good boy, you've been wronged. Chu Yang was stunned. How have I been wronged? I've been planning for so long to start a fight with them, and I'm about to see blood. How did it become a humiliation to my parents? This? Where did this come from? Sigh, so be it. Chu Yang thought to himself and then said painfully, I'm not doing all this for this. After all, the more purple crystals there are, the better. And Sister Lur needs everyone's help. So, Father, you just have to help me settle the medical center. As for the rest, you don't have to worry about it. This is good. Chu Feiling and Yang Ruolin looked at each other and felt that if Chu Yang stayed in the clan now, he would be easily schemed against by the second brother and his sons. It was better to go out and lie low. The second brother and his sons were not easy to deal with, and their son was honest and pure. They were afraid that he would not be a match for them. If Chu Fian knew what the couple was thinking now, he would definitely pass out. After the matter was settled, Chu Yang felt relaxed and finally asked a question that had been in his heart for a long time. Mother, when you saw me, was there anyone else beside me? No, Yang Ruolin said. Oh. Chu Yang frowned. Don't think about going back for another 3 days. Chu Feiling said majestically. All the passageways in the heavens have been closed. Even supreme martial artists can't pass through. Ah? Chu Yang was thinking about this, but he was shocked when he heard this. Why? Yang Ruolin sighed and said, It's all because of the birth of that damned Calamity Sword Master, which caused the heavens and earth to be closed. Damned Calamity Sword Master? Chu Yang was stunned. There's such a thing? Hey, son, you have to be careful in the future. Try not to provoke others easily. This Calamity Sword Master is not someone to be trifled with. The cruelty and viciousness of this Calamity Sword Master is quite. Yang Ruolin combed her son's hair lovingly and sincerely taught him. She gave her son a lesson about the cruel Calamity Sword Master. Chu Yang was speechless and said angrily, This Calamity Sword Master is really a jerk. Yang Ruolin said, Yes. Chu Yang. So, the four of them changed the topic from the clan, the upper three heavens, the flat mountain ridge, the Chu clan, Chu Lur's illness. Everyone worked together to talk about the terror of the Calamity Sword Master, the cruelty of the Calamity Sword Master, the success of the Calamity Sword Master, the legend of the Calamity Sword Master. Chu Yang laughed dryly and listened to them in a daze, as if he was listening to a book from heaven. Alas, it seems that this kid really has never heard of it. Well, in the lower three heavens, who knows about the terror of the Calamity Sword Master? The three elders sighed in their hearts, and their desire to tutor Chu Yang became even stronger. Amidst the cursing of the Calamity Sword Master, Chu Yang felt extremely conflicted. He felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles, and spent the night as if it were a year. In the end, Minister Chu's saliva unknowingly dripped down to his chin, and he was in a daze. The evil Calamity Sword Master! Early the next morning, Chu Feiling immediately went to make arrangements for the medical center. Of course, it was under the banner of the clan, to seek benefits for the clan. Chu Fian had already gone out to investigate. Since he had decided to do it, he would go all out. Moreover, this was related to the future of his eldest nephew and the illness of his most beloved niece. Chu Yang drowsily supported his head and leaned on the chair. He thought of the conversation last night. All the medicinal materials are at sky-high prices. Even if you want to buy them, they won't sell them, and so on. He couldn't help but smile, and said to himself disdainfully, "When did I say that I want to buy them? If I spend purple crystals for such little things, how troublesome. If I can't buy them, can I steal them? Can I steal them? Can I take them by force? Cheating, swindling, stealing, robbing. What kind of methods can I get them? As long as there are, they won't escape from my hands." Minister Chu gritted his teeth and thought, "As for purple crystals, I'm waiting for others to deliver them to me. Do they really think that I'm going to open a medical center to save everyone?" Chapter 750. Chu Lur actually slept all the way from night to noon. When she woke up, the little girl stretched lazily. Her eyes were still drowsy, and she was somewhat surprised and confused. She tried to stand up, and looked around in a daze. Suddenly she screamed, "Ah! Why don't I feel any pain today?" At the side, Duan Shuyi's face was covered in tears. She hugged her daughter and said, "It doesn't hurt anymore. It doesn't hurt anymore. It won't hurt anymore. My poor child." Chu Lur looked around in disbelief. There was an indescribable fear on her face. It was as if the sudden cessation of pain was something unacceptable to her. After a long time, she finally woke up. She gently snuggled into her mother's embrace, and said in a dreamy voice, "Mother, I don't feel pain anymore. This time, it's real." Her voice was very soft, as if she was still afraid that this was a dream. If her voice was too loud, she would wake up from this dream. "It's true, it's true." Duan Shui hugged her daughter tightly as tears streamed down her face. "Your big brother cured you. It's cured." Chu Lur was still in a daze for a while before she finally woke up completely. She asked, "Mother, where's my elder brother? Your big brother has something important to do. He has already left." Duan Shui wiped her tears. "Let's go. Mother will take you out to comb your hair and dress up beautifully. When your big brother comes back, yes." Lur nodded vigorously. Her chronic illness had been cured by Chu Yang, so she had an inexplicable sense of dependence on Chu Yang. When she woke up and didn't see Chu Yang, she actually felt a sense of loss. It was as if someone she could rely on wasn't by her side. The mother and daughter went out. Yang Ruolan had already prepared a feast for her niece. She wanted to give her niece a good nourishment. Chu Yang and Chu Fian were already on their way to the medical center. If Chu Fei Ling were to personally handle this matter, wouldn't a small pharmacy be a piece of cake? And it was located on the busiest street of Wujing town in the flat mountain ridge. Chu Failong didn't make things difficult for him. Moreover, he had personally arranged for it to be handled as soon as possible. As per Chu Yang's request, all the medicinal herbs inside were intercepted and kept as fodder. Then a counter, a consultation area, and a chair were added. A row of benches and a few rooms were prepared to accommodate the patients. That was all. But when Chu Yang arrived in front of this medical center, he found out that this small pharmacy that his father had mentioned. It was actually a huge mansion. Outside, there were a total of 7 rooms. Inside, there were 3 entrances and 3 exits. The richly ornamented buildings were surrounded by houses with small bridges and flowing water, flowers and trees. There was even a pavilion and a garden in the courtyard, with purple bamboo swaying in the wind. The moment Chu Yang saw this entire stretch of purple bamboo, he completely fell in love with this place. The purple bamboo was the eternal love of his heart. It was also the only scenery in the world that could shake his heart and soul. Beyond the heavens sect, the purple bamboo fluttered. In his previous life, he had met Enmo Qingwu for the first time. It was a purple bamboo forest. He had pledged his love to Mo Ching Wu in the purple bamboo forest. In his previous life, his final farewell to Mo Ching Wu was still a field of purple bamboo. Chu Yang smiled faintly and walked into the purple bamboos in the courtyard. He stroked them one by one. His eyes were distant and full of disappointment. Who would have thought that the place where I, Chu Yang, started out in the upper three heavens would have such a stretch of purple bamboo? Chu Fian looked at Chu Yang wandering in the purple bamboo forest. His eyes revealed a strange look, but he didn't go forward to disturb him. He knew that Chu Yang seemed to have recalled something. No one would want to be disturbed at such a time. After a long time, when Chu Yang came out of the purple bamboo forest, Chu Fian seemed to feel that something had changed in Chu Yang, but he couldn't put his finger on it. It was as if he had put down something, but also as if he had picked up something. How many people do you need? Chu Fian asked. The two of us are enough. Chu Yang smiled. The two of us? Chu Fian was surprised. Such a big foundation, and there are only two of us. Can we handle it? Don't worry. Chu Yang smiled mysteriously. The two of us are enough. He smiled gently and said, My father and mother can't come here. After all, they are the eldest in the Chu clan. Other than them, I don't have anyone else that I can trust. He looked at Chu Fian and said, Fourth uncle, there's only the two of us left to build a great foundation. Chu Fian touched his nose and smiled bitterly. Minister Chu, as long as you don't break up my old bones and sell them, I'll go crazy with your eldest nephew. Chu Yang tilted his head and looked at him, saying, Fourth uncle, you'll definitely become a legend in the Chongtian continent. Of course. Chu Fian smiled even more bitterly. A legend whose tail is pinched by his own nephew. I guess I'm the only one since ancient times. Chu Yang laughed loudly. Fourth uncle, I don't understand. Why didn't you force yourself on me and bring me back to verify my identity? Wouldn't everything be fine if you did that? Chu Yang asked puzzledly. Chu Fian's face suddenly turned yellow. He stretched out 2 hands, 3 fingers on his left hand and 5 fingers on his right hand, saying, My dear eldest nephew, do you think I didn't want to do that? To tell you the truth, I've already brought back 35 people before you. Chu Yang was stunned. 35. Do you know what that means? Chu Fian couldn't help but twitch a little. He asked with a bitter smile. What does that mean? Chu Yang asked curiously. It means 71 rounds of beatings. Chu Fian wanted to cry but had no tears. Every time I brought back the wrong person, your grandpa would beat me up. Your father would comfort me every time. Then he would get angry at your mother and beat me up the next day. 2 rounds of beatings every time. There's no exception, Chu Fian said speechlessly. That's still 70 rounds of beatings, not 71. Chu Yang was very good at math. But the last time, Elder happened to come out from his closed-door training. Chu Fian couldn't bear to look back. That beating was really terrible. Your luck is really incurable. Fourth uncle. Chu Yang looked at his fourth uncle sympathetically. And the last time, the elder gave me an ultimatum. If I can't find the real one, and bring back a fake one, the elder will turn me into a fake one too. Chu Fian said tearfully as he sighed. Chu Yang said sincerely. Ancestor, you're really my idol. He's also my idol, Chu Fian said sorrowfully. Chu Fian's mood was very bad after Chu Yang mentioned his sad memories. On the same day, he yelled and called for workers. Then, he personally oversaw the work. He held the whip in his hand like a fiend, and cracked it loudly. He completed Chu Yang's request within 2 hours. It was only afternoon before the sky turned dark, but everything was done. Minister Chu grabbed a plaque. With his own hands, he wrote 5 large words in a flamboyant style. Purple crystals Huichun Hall. Then, Chu Fian melted gold and iron into a magnificent plaque according to Chu Yang's request. He hung it on the door. The couplets were naturally made by Chu Yang. Chu Fian was the second shopkeeper, the workers, the nurses and the waiters. He took care of everything. The first part of the couplet was, Give me purple crystals, and I'll bring you back to life. The second part of the couplet was, without purple crystals, I'll leave you to die. She looked exactly like a greedy person. In particular, Minister Chu had ingeniously made the door of the purple crystals Hui Chun Hall into an oval shape. From afar, the plaque and the couplets on the left and right were like ancient beasts opening their bloody mouths. Very vividly, he said, "Brothers, as long as you dare to walk in, I'll dare to kill you." It vividly expressed Minister Chu's thirst for purple crystals. The walls on both sides were originally white. Chu Yang ordered people to paint them white again to advertise. On the left was, specializes in treating difficult and complicated diseases. We don't take care of minor illnesses and disasters. It's normal to come back from the dead. There are internal and external injuries. We'll be cured. On the right was, specializes in treating impotence and premature ejaculation. Then, he drew the shape of a burly man. His back was straight, his face was full of beard, and his eyes were full of lust. He stepped out and crushed a big rock under his feet. On this burly man's straight waist, there were a few large words written in bold. "Men, it's better to be a little bit taller." Beside the foot of this burly man, there were a few big words in the same color. "Men are better the harder they are." On the burly man, there was a few words, "I despise weaklings." On one side, there was only a thick tree stump. Only 1/3 of the big picture was shown. Not a single word was written. Yu Yinjiu. But Minister Chu clearly felt that it wasn't enough. He actually wrote a few words on the wall of the restaurant. "Come, I'll let you do it however you want." Below, there was a small line of words, "Specializes in treating infertility." Chu Yang's abacus was very loud. Nowadays, there were a lot of people who did not have children. Martial artists were particular about refining energy into energy. It wasn't easy to give birth until they reached a certain level. And everyone hoped that they could nurture their descendants through dual cultivation. In that way, they could lay a good foundation for their children when they reached the Xiantian level. So, most of the experts in the heavenly layer world only had descendants when they were old. This was also a major reason that restricted the development of the clan and the reproduction of their descendants. But Minister Chu had 2 lust dragons in his hands and was very confident about this. He definitely dared to say this: "Can't give birth in 30 years? Can't give birth in 50 years? Can't give birth in 200 years? No problem. As long as you come to me, I'll let you give birth." Chu Fian looked at his eldest nephew who was writing on the snow-white wall. The words he wrote were like dragons flying and phoenixes flying. It was really beautiful. He was praising in his heart, "This eldest nephew is really good at martial arts. He's a genius in all aspects. And he can treat illnesses. He's definitely a first-class talent." Then, he saw a series of advertisements written by Minister Chu. Suddenly, Chu Fian's balls almost cramped. "What's this? It's simply laughable and not presentable." Just as he was about to step forward to stop him, Minister Chu said slowly, "Fourth uncle, when you found me, why didn't you tell the family? I just can't understand this." Chu Fian's lips turned green and his face turned white. He covered his head and ran away like a rat. That night, Minister Chu was busy in the purple crystals Huichun Hall. The next morning, as countless fireworks and firecrackers exploded crazily, a piece of news shook the flat mountain ridge of the upper 3 heavens. The medical hall of the peerless divine doctor, Purple Crystals Huichun Hall, had opened. Third update, requesting monthly votes. He couldn't let his brothers say that Feng Ling wouldn't update if everyone voted for him. So, he worked very hard to speed up the plot, and published this update. Tomorrow is July 1st. Chapter 751. Part 7 Chapter 20. Business is difficult. We need to tackle many problems at the same time. Big Boss Chu was wearing a red groom's robe. He was smiling as he welcomed the guests at the entrance of the shop. His eyes were shining with the brilliance of purple crystals. He looked like a rich man. What a sensation! This street was originally the most prosperous one. There were all kinds of people here. Opposite were two famous restaurants in the flat mountain ridge. A few hundred feet away was the Bloodpayers' Hall of the law enforcement officers. The Shao clan's auction and the headquarters of the big chambers of commerce were all on this street. There were many tall buildings. With the sound of the fireworks, everyone rushed over to see what was going on. Even the people from the big clans rushed over. The shopkeepers of the various shops rushed over personally. Because everyone knew that this shop belonged to the Chu clan. It seemed that the Chu clan was going to make a new move. But when everyone got here and saw what was going on, they were all dumbfounded and tongue-tied. Some stared with their eyes wide open, some shook their heads and sighed in disappointment, some looked around in disbelief, and there were even some who burst into laughter. Was this really the Chu clan's shop? Why did such a ridiculous thing suddenly appear? This was even more disgusting than the banners of the martial world. Even the pimps who shouted "Golden Spear, never fall" in the brothels, seemed to be better than this. It was even weirder when they looked again. Other than the Chu clan's fourth master, Chu Fian, no one else was here. So everyone muttered, was this really the Chu clan's shop? Or, what is the Chu clan up to again? Who is that young man? Chu Feiling's wife, who originally wanted to come and watch the ceremony, went back with a red face after seeing Chu Yang's advertisement. As she walked, she gritted her teeth. Chu Yang, this little bastard. When he comes back, I must teach him a lesson. How embarrassing, the Chu clan's fourth master had nowhere to run. He stood at the entrance of the shop in his red robe. His face turned into a monkey's, but after the fireworks and firecrackers were set off like a one-man show, the other bosses still entered the shop in a daze. Then, they congratulated each other, put down their gift bags, and congratulated each other at the speed of a machine gun. Then they left as if they were running for their lives. It wasn't easy to stay in this shop. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. If we stay here for one more minute, the news of I can't make it will spread. How are we going to live then? Chu Yang looked at the table full of red packets and smiled. Seems like this is the fastest way to make money. Should I close the shop today and reopen it tomorrow? He turned his head and saw that Chu Fian was already lying on the chair, gasping for air, on the brink of death. What's wrong with you? Chu Yang was surprised. I've never been so embarrassed in my life before. Chu Fian cried and said, You're fucking acting like you're selling aphrodisiac. What do you mean by putting on a posture of selling aphrodisiac? Chu Yang said discontentedly, I am selling aphrodisiac. Fourth Master Chu's neck tilted and he fainted. Before Shu Michuan too fainted, she felt that her reputation had gone down the drain. No wonder this novel said that if I follow him, I will definitely be able to reach the heavens. He was probably already famous in history, Chu Fian, the fourth son of the Chu clan who specialized in aphrodisiacs. Chu Fian cried but had no tears. Big Boss Chu's debao had been open for a whole day, but it was completely empty. Chu Yang winked at Chu Fian. Fourth uncle, we'll start the operation tonight. What operation? Chu Fian asked puzzledly. We'll find a few places and set a few fires. There shouldn't be any problem, right? Chu Yang smiled kindly and winked mischievously. Chu Fian was confused. Set a fire? Our business is very difficult. We need to do many things at the same time. Chu Yang said worriedly. Chu Fian thought so too. However, Chu Fian soon realized what his eldest nephew meant by multi-pronged. That night, a warehouse of a big business in Wujin town of the flat mountain ridge suddenly emitted a red light. Then, flames started to rise from all directions. In the entire Wujin town of the flat mountain ridge, no less than 30 people were on fire from all directions. 7 asterisks. Immediately, the people shouted and the horses neighed. The sounds of gongs and drums resounded through the sky, and the long howls echoed for a long time. It was the experts from each side gathering their men. Curses that almost drowned out the entire heaven and earth rose and fell in an uproar just like that. Damn it, everyone was sleeping well. Which immoral person set a fire? Isn't this a bastard? After Chu Fian finished setting the fire, he sneaked back to the Purple Crystal's hall. When he entered the hall, he realized that the big boss was not inside. He couldn't help but wonder, where did Chu Yang go? His cultivation hasn't recovered yet. Where could he have gone? He recalled Chu Yang's words before he left, after setting the fire, don't go anywhere. Just come back and look after the house. He seemed to have expected this long ago. Fourth Master Chu was confused. What's this little bastard up to? Where did Big Boss Chu go? The current Big Boss Chu had already changed his body shape. He had become short and fat. He was dressed in black. In the night, he was like a rubber ball. With the sword spirit possessing his body, his speed was really as fast as light. The first thing he did was to go to a shop of the Chu clan. Minister Chu had already asked around. The person in charge of this shop was Chu Feilong's confidant. Since the entire Wujing town was going to suffer, there was no reason why the Chu clan would not suffer, right? Therefore, Chu Feilong's shop became Chu Yang's primary target. Minister Chu used an earth-shattering momentum to rush in. He shook his hands and knocked over 2 guards. After slapping them a dozen times, he asked for the location of the warehouse. He dashed over like a gust of wind and kicked out. 2 huge bronze doors flew out like a pair of wings. Then, Minister Chu casually walked into the warehouse. The guards inside were still in a state of shock. Just as they rushed forward, Chu Yang simply swept the floor, and the 8 burly men were sent flying into the air. Chu Yang waved his firecracker. Immediately, a gust of thick smoke came out. With a whoosh, he rose from the thick smoke. From afar, he could see 4 figures rushing over. Chu Yang snorted, but didn't say anything. He swooped down from midair, and swept past the 4 men like a whirlwind. Bang! 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 The 4 king-level experts swayed a few times as if they were suffering from hysteria. Then, they screamed like pigs being slaughtered. They fell to the ground, and rolled around. Chu Yang had already brutally entered the inner shop. That confidant of Chu Feilong was carrying a small box and trying to squeeze out of the window. He had just stuck his head out. Chu Yang sneered. He quickly stepped forward, grabbed the thick buttocks, and pulled them back. Ah! A strange scream was heard. This king-level expert was already screaming with all his might. Chu Yang had grabbed and flung his butt, and he had lost a whole pound of flesh. Then, Chu Yang poked him a few times. He grabbed the small box with one hand and flew out like a gust of wind. The people in the shop shouted and chased after him. However, they saw a gentle breeze and a bright moon in the sky. People were shouting and horses were neighing from all directions. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. However, the masked man in black who had just stolen the small box had already disappeared. Only the shopkeeper and the 4 martial deacons were wailing and rolling on the ground. It was as if they had received the cruelest punishment in the world. Chu Yang's move was an extremely evil martial art that he had retrieved from the first Tribulation Sword Master's memory, Yang Dispersing Soul Hand. This was an extremely evil martial art. The victim's entire body would spasm and his joints would be dislocated. This was only the first stage. If the victim could not be cured within a day, the punishment would be even worse. For example, this evil martial art could loosen a person's lumbar vertebrae and pelvis. Then, one of them would be smashed forward and the other would be smashed backward. One could only imagine how it would feel like. However, this was not the only thing. At the same time, the person's shoulders, arms, and other important joints would be dislocated and smashed into each other. This was originally a martial art that was specially used for interrogation. After the first Tribulation Sword Master learned it, it became an evil martial art. Now, the sword spirit was controlling Chu Yang's body and using this martial art. He even added his own understanding of the changes. No one would be able to recognize this martial art from 10,000 years ago. Even if the first Tribulation Sword Master came here personally, he would not be able to recognize it. Moreover, in the current heaven-level continent, other than the sword spirit and Chu Yang, no one else could understand this martial art. Minister Chu disappeared as soon as he came out of the hall. The small box was directly stored in the tribulation space. When he opened it, Chu Yang was greatly disappointed. There were only a dozen red crystals, 100 blue crystals, 2 black crystals, and not a single purple crystal. Fuck! Big Boss Chu scolded angrily. You spent so much effort just for such a small thing? So unlucky! He did not think that the assets of the shops of the big clans here were basically returned to the clan once every 3 days. The wealth that he had now was already equivalent to 3 days' worth of the shop's income. Besides, this was already an amazing amount of wealth. And this was just one shop. Chu Yang's black figure was illuminated by the fire in the night. He had already pounced on other places that were on fire like a demon. He destroyed everything in his way. The sword spirit did not even use much strength, but the experts who were guarding the warehouse were already in a mess. Chu Yang reckoned that he had already killed more than 30 third-grade martial kings and a dozen third-grade martial emperors. Basically, every clan had a few. Chu Yang became more and more excited. He was extremely daring. He even looted the 3 biggest shops of the Shao clan. Bang! 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 A first-grade monarch-level expert, an emperor-level expert, and 18 first-grade king-level experts of the Shao clan met with calamity at the same time. Big Boss Chu ransacked more than 30 shops. What made him depressed was that he did not even find a single purple crystal. He only collected less than 100 black crystals, but the blue crystals and red crystals were piled up like a mountain. Big Boss Chu checked with red eyes. Every time he checked, he scolded. He only felt depressed. After putting in so much effort, he only received such a small amount of things. This was simply an insult to Minister Chu's intelligence. Big Boss Chu was very dissatisfied. He made up his mind and went straight to the auction hall of the law enforcement officers while cursing. Fuck, since I've already done it once, I'll make it the biggest one. Anyway, who the fuck knows that I did it? Chapter 752. Law Enforcement Auction Hall. The name of the Law Enforcement Auction Hall was easy to understand. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. At present, there were already a few people in embroidered robes standing at the highest point of the 5-story building, looking into the distance. Wujing Town is in trouble! The person in front had 3 strands of long beard. He had a square face and a pair of deep eyes. He asked, "Which shop do you think started the fire this time? It might not be these 3. The other person was a bit bloated. He had an oval face and seemed to be smiling all the time. He said, "If we were to talk about the start of the fire, although the speed was fast, there was still a pattern to it. It started from the east, went in a big circle, and then ended in the northeast. According to the report, the fire this time was just a surprise attack. The cultivation of the person who started the fire might not be very high. At most, he should be a level 5 martial emperor. Even a martial king could do it. This should be the conclusion of the round-faced man." "What about after that?" the long-bearded man asked with a smile. He was obviously very satisfied with his subordinate's deduction. "After that, it's different. However, it's obvious that this was done by one person. So far, there are 10 shops that have reported to us." Just as he said this, someone shouted from inside, "2 more shops have been robbed. They belong to the Chu clan and the Bao clan. It's 21 shops, and it's still getting worse." The round-faced man immediately changed his tone and said, "This person's cultivation is really terrifying. Even compared to you, boss. I'm afraid." He didn't finish his sentence, but everyone understood what he meant. The few people in silver behind him all changed their expressions. His elder brother was a martial monarch and was the person in charge of the entire flat mountain ridge. This culprit's cultivation was actually higher than his elder brother's. The long-bearded man was silent for a moment before he said, "You're right. This person's speed, ruthlessness, and cultivation are things that I'm no match for. However, we don't have to worry. This is the Shao clan's territory. Although that person isn't afraid of the Shao clan, in the entire continent, I have never heard of anyone who dares to touch us enforcers." The round-faced man smiled proudly. 7 asterisk. Not necessarily. The long-bearded man said solemnly. Have all the items up for auction been properly packed? All the precious treasures seem to have been sent into the secret chamber? They've all entered the secret chamber. The round-faced man chuckled and said, Boss has always been meticulous and thoughtful, but this little brother thinks that, this time, I'm afraid that Boss is overthinking things. I hope I'm just overthinking. The bearded man's face was filled with worry. A report came from inside. This time, the voice was filled with shock. News came from the Shao clan's 3 big shops. All of them have been robbed. Everyone's face changed. This person even dared to rob the Shao clan. Be on guard, the long-bearded man ordered. Everyone, gather immediately. Before he finished speaking, a long howl could be heard. The long-bearded man was shocked and shouted loudly. Immediately! In the blink of an eye, under the fire and thick smoke in the starry sky, a figure had already appeared. The first time this figure appeared, it was only the size of a sparrow. But the second time, it was as big as a human head. The third time, it was standing calmly in front of the auction hall. It was dressed in black and had a black scarf covering its face. It was looking up at Dong Xuebing. Its eyes were shining like 2 bolts of lightning. It was actually a short and fat man. The other experts from the law enforcement hall, including the 4 from before, were all standing behind the long-bearded man. Everyone's face was solemn as they looked at the short and fat man. They could feel a terrifying aura coming from him. It was a sharp, murderous aura. Ha ha! Everyone is lined up so neatly. The short and fat man laughed. His voice was bleak and desolate, making everyone who heard it feel uncomfortable. He said, Come down. This old man is not used to raising his head to talk to people. If you don't want this building to collapse, come down. Arrogant. One of the law enforcement hall's experts changed. 7 by 7 asterisk. Go down! The long-bearded man shouted and said loudly. You have come from afar. Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you. As he said that, he leaped up and landed lightly. He knew that the other party was not boasting. With the other party's cultivation, it was not difficult for him to flatten this building in an instant. Seeing that their boss had gone down, the others could only follow suit. Looking from the ground, the short and fat man looked even shorter. He laughed coldly and said, A wise man submits to circumstances. The law enforcement hall is indeed all wise. These words were like a resounding slap to the face. He was clearly saying that the law enforcement hall was cowardly. Instantly, several people could not hold back and wanted to jump out to teach this arrogant man a lesson. But they were stopped by the long-bearded man. May I know who you are? The long-bearded man stepped forward and asked with a smile. He was elegant and did not get angry at all. Don't you see that I have a long face? The short and fat man was not moved by force or persuasion. He shouted, You're asking for my name? If I can say my name, why would I have a long face? Is your brain made of tofu? Then I won't ask. The long-bearded man smiled calmly and said, May I know why you're here? Please tell me. As long as I can do it, I really hope to be friends with you. I don't have anything else. I'm just lacking something, so I'm here to see if you have it. Seeing that the other party was so polite, the short and fat man also became elegant. May I know what you're lacking? The long-bearded man said gently, I'm Qin Baoshan. I'm the person in charge of the law enforcement hall in the flat mountain ridge. I believe that I can help you. Please tell me. That's good. I've been to a few clans, and this is the only sensible one I've seen. The short and fat man laughed. Actually, it's nothing much. I've taken in 2 disciples. Their cultivation progress is too slow, and I've run out of purple crystals. I'm here to look for some purple crystals. I don't need a lot, just 800 or 1,000 will do. In addition, I'm lacking some heavenly treasures. I'm not asking for much. Whether it's poison or nourishment, 100 of each type should be enough. The long-bearded man, Qin Baoshan's face darkened. Your requirements are really not high. 800 or 1,000 purple crystals, heavenly treasures for poison or nourishment, 100 of each type. The entire auction hall doesn't even have so many purple crystals. You're simply asking for our lives. Brother, your requirements are a little too much. Qin Baoshan took a deep breath and said, I can't take out so many purple crystals now. But if you're in urgent need of them, can I have a discussion with you? What discussion? The short and fat man blinked. I can make the decision to give you 30 purple crystals. This is the maximum amount that I can use. Qin Baoshan said sincerely. I hope that you can think for us and give us a way out. The 13 people behind him were extremely surprised. When did our boss become so soft? He's actually asking for anything? Everyone, let's attack together and chop this damn short and fat man into pieces. How would they know that Qin Baoshan had already judged from the other party's body movements and tone that this person was at least a martial monarch? If they really fought, none of them would be able to survive. At that time, they would really lose everything. Therefore, he spoke nicely, hoping that this fiend would leave and that would be the end of the matter. Qin Baoshan was also not a kind person. He was also a law enforcement officer and had always been tyrannical. But his tyrannical behavior depended on who he was dealing with. That was why he could live for so long. This short and fat man in front of him obviously did not respect him as a law enforcement officer. 30 purple crystals? Do you think I'm always a beggar? The short and fat man was furious. Qin Baoshan, I thought that you're still a sensible person. I didn't expect to be insulted like this. Don't talk nonsense, let's fight. Qin Baoshan shouted. Brother, wait. How many do you want? Why don't we negotiate? Of course, this brother also knows that 1,000 or 800 purple crystals is definitely not something that can be found in such a remote place. If you don't have the intention to go against the law enforcement officers, please be sincere and lay down the path. When doing business, one must always be honest. Honesty. The short and fat man laughed. All right, I won't make things difficult for you. Qin Baoshan, you've compromised today. How about this? I don't want anything from you. You only need to take out 300 purple crystals. I'll turn around and leave today, 300 purple crystals. The wrinkles on Qin Baoshan's face seemed to have deepened. He could take out 300 purple crystals. But they didn't belong to him. They belonged to the organization. If he took them out for no reason, he would be severely punished even if he kept his life. Qin Baoshan, what are you hesitating for? You should know that my conditions are already very generous. The short and fat man's eyes flashed fiercely. Of course, Qin Baoshan knew this. The other party had changed from being overbearing to his current attitude. For a raider, this was already very lenient. And from this point, it also showed that the other party didn't intend to fight to the death with the law enforcement officers. All right. Qin Baoshan's eyes flashed, and he said, I'll verify with you. If you win, I'll give you 300 purple crystals. If Your Excellency loses, Your Excellency should also know that 300 purple crystals are extremely difficult to obtain. As soon as Qin Baoshan said this, everyone was not stupid. They immediately understood what he meant. If Qin Baoshan was defeated, the organization would have nothing to say if he gave out the purple crystals. Moreover, the 13 brothers' lives would be preserved. If Qin Baoshan was defeated, wouldn't they only be sending themselves to their deaths if they went up? The short and fat man laughed. Qin Baoshan, you're a smart man. Let's fight. With a laugh, Qin Baoshan jumped out. A figure flashed in front of Qin Baoshan. The short and fat figure floated up like a black cloud and circled around Qin Baoshan. After 3 rounds, the figure had turned into a big cloud of black fog. Qin Baoshan unsheathed his sword with a clang. He looked down and held his sword, motionless. If the enemy doesn't move, I won't move. There are indeed experts among the law enforcement officers. The short and fat man praised. Suddenly, with a whoosh, the cloud of black fog quickly gathered to one side. It was like a whale sucking in water. It disappeared instantly. It actually sucked the surroundings into a vacuum. Second update. It's too late. I'll continue to work hard. After I woke up this afternoon, I felt that my neck was a little stiff. I thought it was nothing, but I felt even more uncomfortable after I finished writing a chapter. So I went for a massage, which delayed my time. But don't worry. I said 4 updates yesterday, so it's 4 updates. This is a fact. Even Elder Juan can't change it. I'll continue to write, even if it's late. Chapter 753. The short and fat man shouted and immediately rushed forward. Qin Baoshan's sword was like autumn water. It suddenly transformed into a sword mountain and covered Qin Baoshan's head. Qin Baoshan did not put on any pretense at all. His first move was to kill Qin Baoshan with great momentum. With a few clangs, the short and fat man laughed like thunder. He actually dashed madly in the sword light. When Qin Baoshan's sword slashed down, he would use his hand to block it. When his palm and the sword collided, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. After hundreds of collisions, Qin Baoshan had already retreated a dozen steps. The short and fat man laughed and said, "I'm not going to play with you anymore. Go and prepare the purple crystals." His palm struck towards Qin Baoshan. Qin Baoshan tried his best to dodge. His sword was like rain and waterfall. But the opponent's palm floated in like a ghost. Clang! It was a solid palm strike. Boom! Qin Baoshan spat out blood and retreated quickly. The other party rushed up like a shadow. Qin Baoshan only felt the other party's 2 fingers gently caressing his throat. When he was about to die, the other party had already placed a finger on his shoulder. The other party laughed and said, "Leave some memories for me." Qin Baoshan staggered out. His body spun and fell heavily to the ground. He rolled a few times on the ground before he got up with his face covered in dirt. He only felt a sharp pain in his chest. One of his shoulders had already lost feeling. "You're really good at martial arts." Qin Baoshan clenched his teeth and said while touching his shoulder. "You're not convinced?" The short and fat man squinted at him. "Humph!" Qin Baoshan snorted and said, "Go and get 300 purple crystals." The round-faced man knew that he could not do this. And Qin Baoshan had already paid the price. If he did not know what was good for him now, there would be corpses everywhere. He nodded and rushed in. Not long after, he came out holding a white crystal box. His face was twisted and he was very reluctant to part with it. The short and fat man laughed and waved his hand. The white crystal box flew into his hand automatically. He laughed. "The mountains are high and the rivers are long. I'm sure we'll meet again." He rose up and flashed in the night sky, disappearing without a trace. Looking at the direction, he had gone to the north. A few hundred miles to the north was a forest. After this forest, it would no longer be the territory of the flat mountain ridge. It would become the sinking sand valley. All the law enforcers were dumbfounded. Qin Baoshan groaned. Only then did everyone regain their senses. "Big brother, are you all right?" Qin Baoshan snorted and said, "It's not a big deal. He had shown mercy when he slapped me, and I vomited a mouthful of blood, and I am fine. However, his last finger sealed my left shoulder, left arm, and left hand." "Ah!" everyone exclaimed in unison. "This person is a martial saint expert." Qin Baoshan raised the sword in his right hand. When everyone saw this, they were all shocked. The blade of the sword was full of gaps. At first glance, it was actually very uniform, giving people the misconception that this was not a sword, but a piece of paper. And it was a double-sided saw. This was a rare good sword, and it was wielded by Qin Baoshan, who was a martial monarch. But Qin Baoshan only used his palms to break the sword into hundreds of pieces. The 13 people sucked in cold breaths at the same time. If we had attacked him together, the ones lying on the ground now would be the 14 of us. Qin Baoshan's eyes were cold as he looked around. Everyone trembled. "It's all thanks to Big Brother. Big Brother, you've suffered." Report this matter to the branch immediately. Qin Baoshan nodded. And this person obviously doesn't want to fall out with us, so he showed mercy. But no matter whether he showed mercy or not, he had already offended the dignity of the law enforcement officers. Big brother, are you saying that this person is actually? Everyone asked. Yes, this person is very wary of the law enforcement officers. But since he's so wary, he still came to snatch the purple crystals. This means that he really needs the purple crystals, Qin Baoshan said. Short and fat, a martial saint, and lacking the purple crystals. With these 3 clues, this person's identity is no longer a secret. Report this matter quickly. After Qin Baoshan finished his last sentence, he stroked his shoulder and walked inside. Because at this moment, he suddenly felt that his shoulder was hurting more and more, and it was becoming more and more unbearable. Short and fat disappeared like a shooting star. Then, Minister Chu returned to his purple crystals Huichun Hall. 4th Elder Chu had been waiting for a long time. When he saw Chu Yang return, he said angrily, Where did you go? Why are you so late? Chu Yang smiled. 4th uncle, don't be impatient. I just saw that it was very lively outside, so I went out for a stroll. Chu Fian almost fell ill from anger. Went out for a stroll. Why did you go out for a stroll at such a time? Suddenly, he thought of something. Have you recovered your martial power? Yang Fian's face turned bitter. In these few days, he could finally use some of his elemental qi, but he was still far from recovering. Moreover, even if he recovered, he would probably not admit it. Why did you go for a stroll if you haven't recovered? Chu Fian was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. He flew into a rage. Do you know that your words have scared away more than half of my 3 spirits and 7 souls? 4th uncle, we have an agreement. Here, I have the final say. You're my assistant. I make all the decisions, Chu Zhang said slowly. In other words, you're a worker in my clinic. Have you ever seen a worker talk to an old man like this? I'll ask you to be a worker. It would have been better if he didn't mention this. Once he did, Chu Fian flew into a rage out of humiliation. He pounced on Chu Yang and beat him up violently. Of course, I have some scruples when there are others around you. Now that there's only the 2 of us here, you actually dare to threaten me? If I don't take this chance to vent my anger, when will I? Chu Yang had brought this upon himself. He didn't have any cultivation now, and his parents weren't by his side. So, he had to suffer this grievance in silence. Chu Yang screamed in pain. However, Chu Fian still didn't ask what Chu Yang had done this time. After a while, Chu Fian stopped with satisfaction. Seeing that Big Boss Chu's buttocks had become as big as 4 people, he couldn't help but feel comfortable. He thought, damn it, when there's only the 2 of us, I can do whatever I want with this little guy. That was a great idea. Big Boss Chu got up angrily and went to his room to sleep with a black face. In the middle of the night, only 4th Master Chu's owl-like laughter could be heard. The entire flat mountain ridge was in a complete mess. Countless armored cavalry came and went. At this moment, it was the Chu clan's cavalry, the Bao clan's cavalry, and then the Liao clan's cavalry. The 3 big clans were running back and forth, looking for any suspicious clues. Not long after, the Shao clan also arrived. They almost turned the entire flat mountain ridge upside down. The law enforcement hall also issued a new bounty for blood payers, bounty for a short and fat man. The bounty was hung high under the words blood payers. Big Boss Chu didn't have any business at all, so he went to see what was going on. He saw that the bounty was really well drawn. It seemed that among the 14 people last night, there was actually a painting expert. Minister Chu thought, if there's a chance, I'd like to ask this guy to draw a few erotic paintings. This isn't for fun, but a necessity for my purple crystals Huichun Hall. Erotic paintings are also tools for selling aphrodisiacs. Since early morning, all the medical halls in Wujing town were instantly overcrowded. And those who came were all tyrannical people. He cleared out the crowd of irrelevant people and treated the patients. These injured people were all brought back to their clans last night, but their clans obviously couldn't do anything about their injuries. So, they were brought out to seek medical treatment. None of the big clans dared to invite the doctors back directly. Everyone has injured people, why should you invite them back? What are your intentions? You'll get into big trouble if you do that. Only Big Boss Chu's Purple Crystal's Huichun Hall was still deserted. Not a single patient came. Fourth Master Chu was indignant. Fuck, there are so many patients and so many injured people, but none of them came to us. This is really infuriating. Chu Fian couldn't figure out what happened last night. Of course, he suspected his nephew, but Chu Yang's performance was very innocent. He just came here, and his martial arts hadn't recovered. Besides, even if he recovered, Chu Yang couldn't have done it. So, Fourth Master Chu was confused and almost fell ill. Big Boss Chu lay on the recliner and squinted his eyes. Fourth Uncle, don't be impatient. I knew that they would come sooner or later. Chu Fian couldn't be bothered with him. He still went out to take a look every once in a while, but still, no one came. Seeing that it was already noon, Big Boss Chu's place still hadn't opened yet. It was still Big Boss. He couldn't help but scratch his head and anxiously said, Damn it, there are also injured people in our clan. Why don't they come to take care of their own business? Chu Yang rolled his eyes and lay on his side, leaving the back of his head to Fourth Master Chu. He cursed in his heart, You're a jerk. You're collecting money from your own people? Isn't that voluntary labor? And it's to help Chu Filong. I don't have the time to do so. Until afternoon, no one came. But things progressed very quickly. How could these doctors from the flat mountain ridge cure Chu Yang's poison? Since they couldn't cure Chu Yang's poison, these martial emperors and kings were in so much pain that they almost gnawed on their own flesh. How could they spare these quacks? His entourage would smash these medical centers until they were completely wiped out. Only a few medical centers with strong backing were spared. The rest were basically bankrupt. Seeing that the sky was getting dark, Big Boss Chu and his assistant Chu Fian moved out a small table. There were a few dishes and a pot of wine. The two of them took a sip and were very satisfied. The sound of horse hooves suddenly sounded. A group of people and horses pulled a carriage. Along the way, screams could be heard from the carriage. It seemed that there was no hope of curing Chu Yang's injuries. Chu Fian's eyes were very sharp. He said, It's the people from the Bao clan. It seems that they're unlucky. The one leading the horse is Bao Ping'an, the chief steward of the Bao clan. Look at him, it's as if his mother has died. How satisfying. While Fourth Master Chu was gloating, he saw Bao Ping'an turn his head and look over. Then, he rode his horse forward, cupped his hands and said with a fake smile, Oh, isn't this Fourth Master Chu? Chapter 754. Chu Fian sat still and said, Bao Ping'an, did someone die in your family? Look at your ugly face. It's as if you're crying for your mother. Bao Ping'an's face changed and he smiled bitterly. Fourth Master, you must be joking. It's all because of what happened last night. Sa, is your Chu clan safe and sound? Chu Fian rolled his eyes. Whether or not my Chu clan is in trouble is none of your business. Bao Ping'an was only a chief steward in the Bao clan. How would he dare to go against the fourth master of the Chu clan? Laughing bitterly, he rolled his eyes and said, Fourth Master, is this your family's new restaurant? Chu Fian smiled. Do you think I wouldn't come if this clinic belonged to your Bao clan? Bao Ping'an smiled. This is great. A new clinic opened by the Chu clan, and with the fourth master of the Chu clan in charge, you must be a divine doctor. Men, bring the patient in. He turned his head and smiled. Fourth Master, since you're doing business, you can't possibly not let the patient in, right? Chu Fian smiled. Since you're doing business, why would you not let those who depend on you outside? But my clinic is different from others. Bao Ping'an, you have to magnify your eyes and take a look. Once you understand, you can come in. Don't say that I'm blackmailing you. Different from others? How is it different? Bao Ping'an looked carefully. He looked at the couplets and the advertisements. Suddenly he laughed. Fourth Master, is this really your Chu clan's clinic? Chu Fian rolled his eyes. Come in if you want to see a doctor. If you don't, get out. If you laugh again, I'll make sure you don't laugh for the rest of your life. Bao Pingan hurriedly stopped laughing and said, This is the Amethyst Clinic. But how many purple crystals do I need to see a doctor? Fourth Master, your clinic is really unscrupulous. Chu Fian smiled. You're willing to take the bait. If you don't come in, I won't be able to do anything to you even if I eat you alive. But since you're here, don't blame me for the high price. If you can't afford to see a doctor, get out of my way. Don't hinder my business. At this moment, many people rushed over in their carriages. There were still screams in the carriages. Seeing that Bao Pingan stopped here and that there was a clinic here, they couldn't help but stop. In any case, he had searched the entire town but was unable to find anything, so he might as well try his luck here. Bao Pingan gritted his teeth and said, Bring him in! He turned around and smiled. Fourth Master, you'll only pay after you're cured, right? If it can't be cured. If I can't cure him, will you give me money? Chu Fian rolled his eyes. Fourth Master is right, but what is the standard? Bao Pingan asked. It depends on the patient. Chu Yang was dressed in white. He stood up in an amiable manner and said, If it's serious, I'll naturally collect more. If it's a terminal illness, I'll naturally double the amount. This is? Bao Pingan blinked and asked. This is the chief physician of the Purple Crystals, Hui Chun Hall. Chu Fei Yen snorted. He's the big boss of this place, old buddy. Bao Pingan was startled. He couldn't help but carefully size up Chu Yang. Then, he suddenly realized, You must be the Chu clan's eldest young master, right? Bao Pingan greeted the young master. I didn't expect young master to have learned such great skills after being away for so many years. Chu Yang's words were a little ambiguous. Chu Yang said lightly, I'm a physician, and a physician has the heart of a parent. Let's treat him first. Hearing the words a physician has the heart of a parent, Chu Fian, who had just picked up a cup of wine, spat it out and hurriedly turned his head. You little brat, you really dare to speak? Bao Pingan nodded and smiled. He looked deeply at Chu Yang and waved his hand, saying, Young master, please take a look. Can you treat this injury? The person who was carried in was a third-grade martial king. Under the treatment of Yang San, he was in so much pain that he was hovering between life and death. His face was sallow, and his body was still twitching. He glared at Chu Yang, gritted his teeth, and hissed, Little, if you can't treat this grandpa will kill you alive. This guy only cared about the pain just now and didn't hear anything that was said just now. Not only did he not know that Chu Fian was beside him, but he also didn't know that this was the Chu clan's medical center. Of course, he also didn't know that his words had sent his own life to the gates of hell. Bao Pingan shouted, Shut up. He looked nervously at Chu Fian, afraid that he would get angry. Chu Fian's eyes flashed, but he didn't say anything. He just smiled and looked at the man who was in so much pain. There was even a hint of schadenfreude in his eyes. He thought to himself, Your words have angered my nephew. It's worse than offending the real king of hell. Why should I be angry with a dead man? Chu Yang's eyes flashed and he smiled, saying, His injury is so serious. As he said, he bent down and patted here and there, pinching there and picking the painful spots. But his face became more and more solemn. At the last moment, he held the man's waist and twisted it hard. With a cracking sound, the man screamed, spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. You! Bao Pingan was furious. It turns out that it's such a vicious martial art. Divine Dr. Chu looked solemn and compassionate. He suddenly turned his head and said, What are you doing? Why are you pointing at me angrily? Bao Pingan's face was extremely awkward. From his tone, it seemed that this young man had recognized this kind of injury. This was something that he hadn't expected. He hurriedly smiled apologetically. Young master, please enlighten me. What kind of injury is this? You don't know? Chu Yang looked at him in surprise. I don't know. Bao Pingan smiled bitterly. He thought, if I knew, why would I ask you? I'm not asking for it. You don't know? What's your name? Chu Yang stared at him. I thought you knew. Bao Pingon was speechless. As far as I know, this martial art should have been lost. Chu Yang frowned. Why did it appear again? Who could be so vicious as to cultivate such an atrocious kung fu? Young master, this is... Bao Pingon became honest this time. Oh, no wonder you don't know. I also saw it in an ancient book by chance. Tens of thousands of years ago, this martial art was called Flying Finger of Netherworld. It's a vicious martial art. As long as it's used, it'll be worse than death. The joints in the body will automatically collide with each other, and can't be controlled. If it's not treated within 3 days, the joints will definitely break and the person will become disabled. Flying Finger of Netherworld? Hearing this terrifying name, Bao Pingon sucked in a breath of cold air. Full of hope, he asked, Young master, can you cure it? It can be treated. It can be treated, but... Chu Yang dragged his tone. This kind of injury is not easy to treat. Not only does it consume energy, but it also consumes elixirs. Most importantly, do you have enough medical fees? In other words, purple crystals. Bao Pingon was happy and worried at once. He was happy because he finally found someone who could treat it. He was worried because the other party seemed to be ready to take advantage of him. From the looks of it, the butcher's knife has already been raised. Bao Pingon smiled bitterly. But I don't know, is one purple crystal enough for each person? Are you insulting me? Chu Yang was furious. He rolled his eyes and waved his hand. Fourth uncle, send the guests out. Don't. Bao Pingon wanted to cry but had no tears. He hurriedly stopped Chu Yang. Young master, the price is negotiable. 10 purple crystals for each person. Bao Pingon was shocked when Chu Yang opened his mouth. There were more than 20 people in the Bao clan who were injured. So, it would be more than 200 purple crystals. This was a huge fortune. Isn't it too little? Chu Fian said reproachfully. Yang, you're too soft-hearted. Soft-hearted. Bao Pingon was crying in his heart at this moment. He almost wanted to rush up and chop Chu Fian into minced meat. 10 purple crystals for each person, that would be 100,000 white crystals. This guy actually said that he was soft-hearted. What would happen if he hardened his heart? Chu Yang smiled and said earnestly, Fourth uncle, a doctor has the heart of a parent. Chu Fian nodded. This is very reasonable. Bao Pingon's face was full of tears. What kind of parent's heart is this? If someone had such heartless parents, he or she would definitely not be able to live past 1 month. Young Master Chu, can you lower the price? Bao Pingon's face was bitter. There was a hint of pleading in his voice. It's really too expensive. You think it's too expensive? Chu Yang flicked his sleeves. I didn't ask you to treat me. Bao Pingon was stunned. Steward! The 20 or so injured people of the Bao clan shouted at the same time. They were listening at the side. When they were in so much pain that they couldn't bear it anymore, it was really a blessing that fell from the sky for someone to treat their injuries. Now that they saw that the steward had the intention to shirk the price, they couldn't help but plead at the same time. Bao Pingon was in a dilemma. Although he was the steward of the Bao clan, he wasn't the clan master. 10 purple crystals for each of the 20 or so injured people. This was more than 200 purple crystals. How could he dare to make this decision? But if he didn't treat them, he really couldn't bring himself to say it. There were so many people here, from all the big clans, who were watching. If he didn't treat them, the consequences would be unimaginable. He was afraid that the hearts of the people of the Bao clan would immediately disperse. They had risked their lives for the Bao clan, and now they were seriously injured because of the Bao clan. How could you not treat them? Then who would work for you in the future? So, whether Bao Pingon was treated or not, he would be a scapegoat. If he treated them, who would pay for such a large sum of wealth when he returned? Wouldn't he be skinned alive by the clan master? If he didn't treat them. All right, the clan master would say. It's not that I don't want to treat you, but Bao Pingan rejected me at that time. Then, he would definitely be a scapegoat. Maybe one day, he would be plotted against by these people and die without a burial ground. So are you going to treat them or not? Chu Yang looked at him very reasonably. If you don't want to treat them, then make way. There are still people waiting. Immediately, there were shouts outside. Bao Pingan! Are you going to fucking treat them or not? Don't fucking ignore us like a dead person. The grandpas are still waiting here. Why are you fucking occupying the latrine pit and not taking a shit? The people who spoke were from the Liao clan. Bao Pingan cried without tears. Your clan master's son-in-law is among the injured people of the Liao clan. Of course you dare to treat them. But what about me? Among the injured people on my side, is there an important person? The clamor at the back became louder and louder. Especially those who were injured and waiting for treatment. They even cursed Bao Pingan's ancestors. Bao Pingan closed his eyes and finally made up his mind. I'll treat them. If you want to treat them, then carry them in. Divine Dr. Chu waved his hands excitedly. Go in, one by one. One by one, pay purple crystals first. Everyone, 10 purple crystals for one person. There will be no pain at all. If you want to treat them, pay the purple crystals in advance. I won't accept anything else. My fourth uncle is an accountant and a waiter. He pays the money and delivers the goods at the same time. Chapter 755. Divine Dr. Chu's shout was just like a solo performer in Jianghu. He was just short of saying, those who have money, help me out. Those who don't, help me out. The experts from various big clans looked at each other. Damn it, I've long heard that the eldest grandson of the Chu clan was lost. Now, he said that he was found. But looking at this situation, could it be that he's a swindler who's making a living outside? They couldn't help but look at Chu Fian suspiciously. Chu Fian's face was full of black lines. But he didn't dare to flare up and stood up. It's so shameful. I'm really shameful today. I'm the fourth master of the Chu clan. I'm also a reputable person in Flat Mountain Ridge. But I didn't expect that I've not only become a shop assistant who sells aphrodisiac, but also become a swindler. Chu Yang shouted once and even took out a big basin to act as a cashier. He winked at Bao Pingan and smiled. Manager Bao, put in the purple crystals. Don't worry, I'll take care of the injured. Bao Pingan looked at this greedy face with grief and indignation. He really wanted to spit into this mouth that was full of saliva. Helplessly, he placed 10 pieces of glittering purple crystals inside. He hurriedly called for a follower, and told him to return home to report, and retrieve the purple crystals while he was at it. How could he bring more than 200 purple crystals with him when he was out? Wouldn't that be asking for a robbery? Divine Dr. Chu strode into the clinic. He was neither hurried nor slow, and had a well-thought-out plan. The person who was just carried in was the big man who scolded Chu Yang just now. So, Minister Chu naturally wanted to give him proper treatment. After entering, he saw that the big man was already lying on the bed. Divine Dr. Chu waved his hand. All of you go out. I'll treat this strong man. The two big men didn't dare to say anything and quietly walked out. Divine Dr. Chu drew the curtain with a swoosh. Then he slapped that guy's shoulder. This was the place where he hit with his finger, and it was also the most painful place. The people outside only heard a sound like, ouch-o, and then there was no more movement. The burly man suddenly woke up from the severe pain and shouted. Then Divine Dr. Chu slapped him on the waist again, and he fainted again. He woke up and fainted again. Then he would wake up and faint again. Divine Dr. Chu's expression was calm. He bemoaned the state of the universe and pitied the fate of mankind. His face was solemn, which was the standard look of a doctor's parental heart. At first glance, one could tell that he was as kind as an angel. This cycle repeated itself exactly once. The big man was in so much pain that he was sweating profusely. Even the bed was soaked in sweat. His black face had turned into a waxy yellow color, and he could no longer speak. Occasionally, he would wake up and look at Divine Dr. Chu with pleading eyes. Divine Dr. Chu finally started. He lifted up one of the man's legs and used all his strength to lift it up. Immediately, another hellish wail and howl was heard. Then, she lifted his other leg and turned him over with a smack. The big man's eyes rolled back, and this time, he fell into a deep coma. "How dare you scold me?" Divine Dr. Chu muttered to himself. "Fuck you, if I don't let you roll in the 18 levels of hell, you won't know what the king of hell looks like." Only then did the real treatment begin. He pointed his finger at his throat, which instantly transformed into a finger hammer, and tapped his shoulder. His other hand tapped his tailbone at the same time, which instantly transformed into a palm and pushed upwards. A cracking sound came from an unknown place. The unconscious big man's face also revealed a hint of comfort. Obviously, he had recovered. Divine Dr. Chu frowned and took out a big piece of Coptis chinensis from the tribulation space. He crushed it into powder with both hands, pinched the big man's nose with 2 fingers, opened his mouth and sprinkled the powder into his mouth. Then, he clapped his hands and stretched his hands into the water basin at the side. He lifted the water droplets and dripped them on his face. At first glance, it seemed that his face was full of sweat. Then, he walked out weakly and leaned against the door frame as if he could not stand. He said weakly, "Next one." He looked like a weak person who had just finished a 5-kilometer cross-country run. The sweat on his face was dripping down. The people outside were a little frightened when they heard the screams inside. But when they saw Divine Dr. Chu's current appearance, they all gasped. It seemed that this injury was really difficult to treat. This young and strong divine doctor was actually so tired. Chu Fian was taken aback and stood up. "Yang Yang, are you okay?" Chu Yang said weakly. I can still hold on." "Fourth uncle. Those purple crystals aren't fake, right?" Chu Fian suddenly realized that this guy was pretending. He almost couldn't help but kick him. He said angrily, "They're all real." "That's good. My hard work was not in vain." Divine Dr. Chu sighed with relief. "It's really too tiring to treat such evil skills from ancient times." Chu Fian turned his head and pretended that he didn't hear anything. Bao Pingan said worriedly, "Divine Dr. Chu, can you still hold on?" At this time, someone had already carried out the man inside. His limbs were swollen like steamed buns, and his breathing was weak. But the previous twitching and spasming situation had already disappeared. Obviously, Divine Dr. Chu had already treated him. Bao Pingan went forward and checked with his hands. He was immediately relieved and said emotionally, "Divine Dr. Chu is really an expert. He actually healed his injuries in such a short period of time." This sentence was really amazing. The people from the other clans outside were still observing. Seeing that it was indeed effective, they immediately clamored, "Treat us first. Treat us first." A big man was lying on the stretcher and crying loudly, "Treat me first, it's so painful." This person was the son-in-law of the Liao clan's clan master. This guy was used to living like a prince. When had he ever suffered such pain? Now that he finally saw hope, he couldn't bear it anymore. Chu Fian frowned and shouted, "Line up! How can it be so noisy? This is treating a patient, not buying groceries." Everyone was afraid of his prestige and didn't dare to be rash. They were angry but didn't dare to say anything. Bao Pingan had already put in another 10 purple crystals. He said respectfully, "Divine Dr. Chu, thank you." He waved his hand and another person was carried in. Chu Yang walked in shakily. Bao Pingan said attentively, "Divine Doctor, since you're so tired, why don't I send someone to help you?" Chu Yang looked at him from the corner of his eyes and said, "When someone is injured by such vicious martial arts, every treatment must not be wrong. Once there's a mistake, he'll be disabled for life. Do you know how much strength to use with your clumsy hands and feet? How to rotate? How to pierce? How to stretch? How to spiral? How much to pierce? How to react? How to react?" Bao Pingan's face was full of cold sweat. "Then I'll have to trouble you. Chu Yang snorted and said, "Do you think it's so easy to earn these 10 purple crystals?" I'm also risking my life." Bao Pingan deeply agreed. Seeing that divine Dr. Chu was so tired, and his face was so pale, he couldn't help but say, "Divine Doctor, you've worked hard." He thought in his heart, "It's best that you die of exhaustion after treating my clans." As Chu Fian received the purple crystals, he was laughing in his heart. He coughed and said, "Line up according to the order of receiving the purple crystals. Not even a single purple crystal less. I don't want an extra purple crystal." Everyone despised him. Look at this uncle. In order to earn purple crystals, he actually doesn't care about the life and death of his nephew. Can't he see that he's so tired that he can't even crawl? But of course, they wouldn't expose him. Anyway, even if he died of exhaustion, he was still a member of the Chu clan. As long as he finished treating our injuries before he died of exhaustion, it would be fine. Some who didn't bring enough purple crystals hurriedly sent people back home to get more. If the divine doctor died of exhaustion, there would be no one to treat them. Just at this moment, a ghost-like wail and wolf-like howl came from inside again. This time, the sound was even more terrifying. After a while, divine Dr. Chu walked out while wiping his sweat. When he walked, he actually staggered a little and his footsteps were weak. He only gave Chu Fian a look. Chu Fian understood tacitly. Next, holding a bunch of purple crystals, he beamed with delight. "My nephew is really too awesome. After treating all these people today, it's enough for the Chu clan's income for half a year. He's really the king of Hell Chu. He's really good at making money." Everyone's eyes were spitting fire. They couldn't wait to snatch the purple crystals. After another ghost-like wail and wolf-like howl, Chu Fian didn't wait for Chu Yang to come out. He directly shouted without raising his head. "Next! Wait, hand over the purple crystals first. You want to take advantage of me?" Bao Pingan was extremely speechless. He could only put down another 10 purple crystals. Seeing that the 30 purple crystals he had with him had already been used up, but the clan still hadn't sent anyone to deliver them. He couldn't help but feel anxious. These 30 purple crystals were the total cost of treating the injuries this time. At this moment, the crowd outside separated into two sides. A group of valiant-looking men in green drove a carriage over. Without exception, screams could be heard from the carriage. They were from the Shao clan. The whole area was the territory of the Shao clan. The person who came was the second steward of the Shao clan in the flat mountain ridge. Although Chu Fian didn't have a close relationship with this person, he knew him quite well. He didn't dare to neglect him. He stood up and politely said, "So it's Brother Shao who came personally. Why, is there someone in your clan injured too?" The leader of the group was a man with a square face and big ears. He looked very amiable, but his eyes were cold. He cupped his hands and smiled. "Fourth Elder Chu, to tell you the truth, someone took away some of our prestige last night. It was extremely embarrassing." The flat mountain ridge was the territory of the Chu clan. This steward of the Shao clan didn't dare to be presumptuous. He changed the topic and said with a smile, "Fourth Elder Chu, I heard that this medical center belongs to your clan? Nephew? Can it treat such injuries? Is that right?" Chu Fian laughed mischievously and pulled him aside. He said, "To tell you the truth, my nephew has just returned. He doesn't have any family assets. So, he thought of a way to open a clinic here. He can earn some daily necessities and some crystals for cultivation." He blinked his eyes with a look that said, "You know, I know, everyone knows." The man in green obviously understood the situation of the Chu clan very well. He let out a long oh and smiled. "I see. There's nothing wrong with this." Chu Yang heard the movements outside and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. People from the Shao clan? Chapter 756. Chu Yang smiled sinisterly. "I've also injured many people from the Shao clan last night. Humph, it's just that I'm not strong enough now. Should I save some face for the Shao clan?" The sword spirit also pondered in the tribulation space and said, "With your current strength, you don't even have a firm foothold in the Chu clan. If you rashly clash with the Shao clan, you won't be able to contend with them. If they go overboard, you can give in a little." The sword spirit's words were purely out of good intentions, and it was also the most appropriate way to deal with the current situation. However, this sentence made Chu Yang feel very aggrieved. He nodded deeply and said, "All right, on the surface, of course, I have to save some face for them." The sword spirit's heart skipped a beat. On the surface? Do you still want to do anything in the interior? You've already injured more than 20 people, and you still feel aggrieved? I've never seen such a person who can only take advantage of others without suffering any losses. Chu Yang faintly smiled. Sword spirit, you finally understand me. The sword spirit was surprised. What? Chu Yang said. My biggest advantage is my temper. I'd rather take advantage of others than suffer losses. The sword spirit was speechless and directly retreated. Outside, Chu Fian saw that the other party had understood. He laughed and took advantage of the situation, saying, "Actually, I didn't take much. My nephew only took 10 purple crystals per person for these kinds of injuries that no one knows about." The face of the man in green twitched. He couldn't help but look at the carriage behind him. There are many people inside. If 10 purple crystals per person, 220 purple crystals would fly away just like that. This price is a little too high. The man in green shook his head repeatedly. Brother Shao, you're wrong. Chu Fian's face became serious, and he lowered his voice. This is a good opportunity to buy people's hearts. Besides, my nephew just came back. Brother Shao, you're his elder. Just take it as a greeting gift. This Brother Shao obviously didn't prepare a greeting gift. He looked embarrassed. Brother Chu, it's really too expensive. Chu Fian lowered his voice. Since Brother Shao is here, I have to give you face no matter what. How about this, you put down the purple crystals first. After you're done, I'll secretly give you another half. I have to give you face. Chu Fian knew that if the other party wanted a discount, he couldn't refuse. But he had to give face, and he couldn't appear weak. They could only operate under the table like this. After all, the Shao clan was one of the dominant clans in the Heaven Layer. The Chu clan could not afford to offend the Shao clan. Furthermore, his nephew had just entered the Chu clan. If he offended the Shao clan for the sake of the Chu clan, he was afraid that he would never be able to hold his head up high in the Chu clan in the future. Therefore, he could only pretend to have the upper hand and suffer a loss in secret. In fact, Fourth Master Chu was calculating in his heart. 5 purple crystals per person was also a huge sum of wealth. After all, he only received 12 purple crystals from the clan in a year. 1 purple crystal per month. Now, even if there were 5 pieces, it would still be 110 purple crystals. It was a huge fortune. Hearing Chu Fian's words, the steward of the Shao clan still had a look of displeasure on his face. Finally, he nodded his head and said, Fourth Elder Chu, I'm really grateful for your generosity. Chu Fian laughed and said, Brother Yulong, you're too polite. So this person was called Shao Yulong. Inside the room, Chu Yang was fiercely tormenting the man. The man on the bed was screaming out of breath. He was hovering between life and death. He was alive and dead. But his ears were pricked up, and he was listening to the conversation outside. Half? Then I'm losing out. Big Boss Chu was furious. He could not help but exert more strength. The man under him screamed, Grandpa! He just woke up and fainted again. On the other side, Shao Yulong and Steward Zhao's eyes also flashed with a cold light. They smiled and thought, Motherfucker, I've never seen such a black price in the world. You even gave me a discount. Let's treat him first, and then we'll come and rob your little medical center at night. Even if you, old Fourth Chu, are alone, you won't be our match. But this matter needs to be done seamlessly without leaving any traces. Who should I send? Thinking, he smiled and came to Bao Ping An. He said kindly, Steward Bao. Bao Ping An's face was bitter. Brother Shao, How many people do you have here? Xiao Yulong dragged his words. There are 10 more people. Soon. Bao Pingan wiped his sweat. Do you have enough purple crystals? Xiao Yulong naturally knew. With Bao Pingan's status, how could he bring so many purple crystals with him? I've already sent someone home to get them. They'll be back soon. Bao Pingan smiled bitterly. So you don't have any purple crystals now? Xiao Yulong said with a fake smile. If that's the case, are we just going to wait for you? Why don't I add some food? Tell me, isn't this a little bullying? Although he said that he was warm and that he would never bully others, his stance was clearly bullying others. And after bullying people, he still had to make them say, No, I'm definitely not bullying people. Inside, Chu Jiang was full of admiration. Damn it, this guy is even more shameless than me. Bao Pingan looked around for help. But who would offend the powerful Xiao clan for a steward of the Bao clan? One by one, they turned their faces away. There were even some who were laughing at his misfortune. Just as Chu Jiang expected. No, Brother Xiao has always been benevolent and righteous. Why would he bully people? Bao Pingan said humbly. If that's the case, I'll be behind Brother Xiao. As soon as he said this, the 10 people in the Bao clan who were waiting for treatment started moaning loudly. Oh heavens, this kind of pain is a matter of life and death for even a blink of an eye. But someone actually stuffed it in. They suddenly felt that there was nothing left to live for. Xiao Yulong said guiltily. This is not good, right? Brother Xiao, what are you saying? Since Brother Xiao has stepped forward, even if you don't say it, our Bao clan is also willing to take a step back. Bao Pingan said righteously, but he was cursing Xiao Yulong's mother in his heart. Damn it, I've never seen such a shameless person. Then, I'll add food, really add food? Xiao Yulong asked inquisitively. Bao Pingan's face finally twitched. He turned his head away with a black face. This time, even Chu Fian could not bear to see it. Damn it, he had already taken a step back, but you're still so unforgiving. Do you have to force him to death? He could not help but cough. Chu Yang's voice came from inside at the right time. Next. Xiao Yulong waved his hand, and the people from the Xiao clan immediately rushed over and carried the people inside. Xiao Yulong gave a look to one of the people behind him. That person understood, and went into a carriage. Then, a clapping sound could be heard from the carriage. Then, he walked out with a parcel. Xiao Yulong took the parcel from him and placed it in a basin in front of Chu Fian. He smiled and said, Fourth Elder Chu, here are 220 purple crystals. Please count them. With a clatter, the purple crystals in the parcel were poured out. There was an uproar all around. Chu Fian was so angry that he almost fainted. There were indeed 220 purple crystals in the parcel, but they were half the size of ordinary purple crystals. It turned out that the cracking sound in the carriage was actually caused by the purple crystals being cut into 2 halves. This was pure humiliation. Furthermore, it was bullying. Xiao Yulong used this method to express his dissatisfaction with Chu Fian charging him a huge sum of purple crystals. At the same time, it also showed that the Xiao clan could do whatever they wanted in this region. Whoever dared to disobey would end up like these broken purple crystals. Even if they were expensive, I can break them if I want to. Bao Pingan, who had just been humiliated, laughed in schadenfreude. There was silence all around. Everyone wanted to see how Chu Fian would deal with this matter. Chu Fian's hands started to tremble, and his face turned purple. Just as he was about to explode, he saw the door curtain open. Chu Yang's footsteps were weak, and he almost fell down as he walked over. Fourth uncle, what's wrong? Chu Fian was shocked and stood up. I'm tired. Fourth uncle, please help me recover my body. So many people are waiting. I'm very anxious, Chu Yang said weakly. Chu Fian hurriedly went over and used his martial arts to help his nephew recover his body. Chu Yang took the opportunity to fall into his arms. Chu Fian felt a sharp pain on his thigh. Chu Yang had pinched him hard. He suddenly realized that he could not have any conflict with the Shao clan at this time and place. He slowly calmed down. Chu Yang leaned on Chu Fian's arms. His face was pale, and his lips were a little blue. He looked at Xiao Yulong weakly and said, "Steward Xiao, please don't be impatient. It's really, my body is too weak, cough cough cough, cough cough cough. I'm not confident. Don't blame me, don't blame me. I'll be fine soon." Xiao Yulong blinked and smiled sinisterly. He said, "Young brother Chu, I'll help you too. Our Shao clan is the orthodox Xian technique in the world." As he said, he reached out and held Chu Yang's other hand. In the space, the sword's spirit twitched his mouth. "Your Shao clan is the orthodox Xian technique? Damn it, your hands are too rough to carry shoes for the orthodox Xian technique." Chu Yang was overjoyed. "Thank you, Steward Xiao." Xiao Yulong held Chu Yang's hand and all his doubts disappeared. It's not that this young man has no cultivation, but that it has been destroyed. Transferring cultivation to him is like dropping into a bottomless pit. It can only help him recover his physical strength, and nothing else. Suddenly, such a thing happened. All the doctors were unable to treat him, but at such a critical moment, a young man suddenly appeared who could treat him, and charged such an expensive fee. How could Xiao Yulong not be suspicious? Even if this young man was not the disciple of that short and fat troublemaker, they were definitely related. He wasn't the only one. Everyone present had the same suspicion. After all, no one was stupid. They would investigate this matter immediately after Chu Yang was cured. But Xiao Yulong had already concluded that even if this young man was related, it wouldn't be a big deal. What could a cripple do? He thought deeper. Even if that person wanted to do this, he would do it very secretly. Why would he do it in such a big way? As such, the doubts in his heart slowly disappeared. Now, he grabbed Chu Yang's hand and couldn't pull it back. How could he take it back when he said that he wanted to help Chu Yang recover? Wouldn't that be slapping his own face? Xiao Yulong could only frown and transfer his cultivation over reluctantly. Chu Yang was shocked and said happily, "Fourth uncle, let go. Steward Zhao's Xian technique is indeed orthodox. Once it's transferred, it's much more comfortable than yours. If you transfer it at the same time, the two Xian techniques will clash. I feel so uncomfortable." Xiao Yulong's face darkened at once. Wasn't this fucking taking him as a worker? Chapter 757. While enjoying Xiao Yulong's vital energy, Chu Yang moaned comfortably and explained cautiously. "Steward Xiao, this kind of vicious injury is very difficult to treat, I know." Xiao Yulong's face was black. He continued to transfer his precious energy, gritting his teeth and his cheeks twitching. Chu Yang narrowed his eyes comfortably. "Well, it's really comfortable." Xiao Yulong was furious and almost stopped working. "You fucking treat me as a prostitute in a brothel?" However, Chu Yang was already talking nonstop. "Moreover, before the treatment, I need to meticulously help the seniors move their muscles and bones. After all, they have to return to their original positions in order to get the treatment done in one fell swoop. It may be very painful. Please remind everyone in advance so that they can be mentally prepared. Otherwise, I won't be able to bear it if the seniors move around in pain. Don't blame me." Xiao Yulong gritted his teeth and said, "We're all Jianghu people. We're used to life and death. Who will be afraid of pain?" Chu Yang chattered. "If it's just blaming, it's fine. But I'm not skilled enough. If they move at the critical moment and make a mistake, they'll be disabled for life." Xiao Yulong nodded with a gloomy face. He turned his face and shouted, "Did you all hear that?" "We heard." Although the wounded were in pain and sweating, they still forced themselves to answer. Chu Yang laughed and said, "Thank you, thank you. Thank you for your understanding. Actually, besides being a little greedy, I don't have any major problems." Xiao Yulong was a little impatient. "Are you almost done?" Chu Yang felt for a while. "It's really effective. You're indeed the orthodox one." "Ha!" Every time my fourth uncle helps me recover, it takes half an hour. Steward Xiao, you didn't even use half an hour. You're amazing. Chu Fian lowered his head in grief and indignation. He gritted his teeth in his heart. Damn it, your fourth uncle is too useless. When did I help you recover? Half an hour? Xiao Yulong's face looked better. He said kindly. Sorry to trouble you, nephew Chu. Chu Yang chuckled. He was pure and innocent, kind and benevolent. Then, he said with compassion, No, a doctor has the heart of a parent. Xiao Yulong's face twitched, and his whole body seemed to shiver. He turned his face away. At the side, Bao Pinyan, who was also choked by the words a doctor has the heart of a parent, felt very comfortable as if he had taken a cold bath on a hot day. You deserve it. Who asked you to bully others? Now you've experienced the feeling of eating a fly? Chu Yang stood up and walked in energetically. Inside were the injured members of the Xiao clan. The moment Chu Yang entered the door, the smile in his eyes had already turned into a cruel and vicious one. You actually cut open my purple crystals? You're really fuck. If I don't fuck, how would I be worthy of those broken chi and of those spiritual aura of those broken Xiao of his with his hands, Zhao's and Xiao's Xiao, was to Xiao of his, Xiao of the to him, of he to, was stopped. Of Xiao of the Zhao's. Everyone was an expert. How could they not know that the person had fainted while screaming? They couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. The person inside is famous for not being afraid of death and pain. Yet, he actually screamed so miserably. Then, how much pain must he be in? Screams of agony came from the inside, and the people outside broke out in a cold sweat. After a long time, after the last scream, which sounded as if his heart was about to be vomited out, Divine Dr. Chu walked out slowly. Next. He felt a little weak again. The screams didn't stop. This wasn't a clinic. It was a slaughterhouse. It had been dark for 2 hours. The night wind was blowing, accompanied by the screams. This place was as scary as hell. After finishing the fourth person, Chu Yang was already drifting in the wind. His steps were light and he even fell down. He didn't look for Chu Fian anymore. Instead, he went directly to Xiao Yulong and smiled sincerely. Steward Xiao. Please help me recover. You're fast. Xiao Yulong's nose was crooked. Sure enough, he's treating me as a worker, but what Chu Yang said was reasonable. You're fast. Now, the people of the Xiao clan were waiting for treatment. Everyone was in an abyss of suffering. If you're fast, you'll suffer less. So, they all looked at Xiao Yulong with pleading eyes. Xiao Yulong gritted his teeth so hard that they almost broke. He squeezed out a smile. That's how it should be. Then, he continued to work. As soon as Xiao Yulong channeled his martial arts, Divine Dr. Chu moaned rhythmically, like a wild cat calling for spring. Xiao Yulong's hair stood on end and he almost vomited out his food. Damn it, those who can see will of course know that I'm helping you recover. Those who can't see and hear this sound will think that I'm moaning? This cycle repeated. When the treatment of the 22 people of the Xiao clan was completed, the moon was already high in the sky. Xiao Yulong's face was pale and he was weak. Half of it was because he was tired, half of it was because he was angry, and some of it was because he was shy. Anyone who heard a man moaning a few times would feel like this. In the end, Divine Dr. Chu just touched Xiao Yulong's hand and didn't start to deliver the medicine, but he called out. Everyone looked at Xiao Yulong with ambiguous eyes. No matter how thick-skinned Xiao Yulong and Steward Xiao were, they also felt as if they were sitting on pins and needles. Xiao Yulong brought the people of the Xiao clan and left the place almost at the speed of light. When they left, Chu Fian could see that even Xiao Yulong's neck had turned red. At this time, the people of the Bao clan had already sent the purple crystals over. Then, it was the people of the Bao clan and the Liao clan. Xiao Yulong dared to cut the purple crystals, but these people definitely didn't dare to. If another clan did this, Chu Fian would definitely kill them immediately. There was no doubt about this. The treatment went on till dawn. Finally, it was finished. No one realized that divine Dr. Chu's treatment speed had gradually sped up. It was just that when boiling a frog in warm water, the frog would be scooped out before the water boiled. So, no one realized it. What Chu Yang couldn't figure out was, why didn't Qin Baoshan, who was in charge of the Hall of Justice, come? Could it be that he could treat himself? This couldn't be, right? Although the finger that day wasn't the yin-yang soul-dispersing hand, it was also the unique skill of the first-generation Calamity Sword Master, Meridian Sealing Finger. Now, the sword spirit had transformed it into Meridian Shattering Finger. If old Qin didn't come in 3 days, his arm would really be crippled. Moreover, the people of the other clans had come, but the people of the Chu clan didn't? What was going on? Not only Chu Yang couldn't figure out this matter, but Chu Fian also couldn't figure it out. They busied themselves all the way until daybreak. Only then did they send off the evil spirits. The uncle and nephew duo immediately closed the door and laid down on the bed. "I'm so tired," Chu Fian groaned. After lying on the bed for a while, he got up again. "But it's worth it! So many purple crystals, ha! It's so satisfying! I've never earned so many purple crystals in a single day in my entire life. This feeling is too blissful." "Fourth uncle, what are you talking about?" "There are 2 problems with your words." Chu Yang raised 2 fingers. "What are the 2 problems?" Chu Fian was stunned. "Firstly, these purple crystals were earned by me in a day, not by you. Secondly, most of these purple crystals are mine. So I should say that I'm blissful, but you can only say that it's satisfying. I'll strangle you, you little brat." Chu Fian was furious and was about to pounce on Chu Yang to teach him a lesson. "Stop!" Chu Yang raised his hand. "Fourth uncle, let's settle the accounts first, and see how much we earned today." The uncle and nephew pounced on the huge pile of purple crystals like money grubbers. 1 piece, 2 pieces, 10 pieces, 50 pieces, 100 pieces, 100 pieces, 100 pieces, 180 pieces. 355 pieces. Chu Fian gasped. "Complete purple crystals, 470 pieces. My God! This is the Chu clan's income for half a year, and it's much more than that. This is the income of thousands of people in our clan." Chu Yang snorted and said, "Can those incomplete ones be used?" "There's no effect when the purple crystals are cut. Only a lot of spiritual energy will leak out from the cut, but it's not a big deal," Chu Fian said. "But it's hard to swallow this." "Indeed," Chu Yang agreed. As he spoke, he kept all the purple crystals into a big bag and beamed with delight. Then, he took out 10 pieces of broken purple crystals to make up 5 pieces. "Fourth uncle, take these and use them." Chu Fian looked at the mountain-like bag in Chu Yang's hands and then looked at the 5 pieces in his own hands. He was a little dazed. "What?" "To split the loot," Chu Yang said matter-of-factly. "Fourth uncle, you've worked hard today. Use these purple crystals to nourish your body. Let's continue tomorrow." Chu Fian looked at him in a daze and then looked down at the purple crystals in his hands. Then, he raised his head and slowly opened his mouth. "I only have these?" Chu Yang had already picked up the bag and walked to the door. "Fourth uncle, don't think it's too much. We'll have a lot of money in the future." Then he left. Chu Fian was stunned in the room. After a long time, he rushed out furiously. "Bastard! Stop right there. Do you really think that I'll drink the soup while you eat the meat? You only gave me 5 pieces of this much. I'm your fucking uncle. Do you think I'm a beggar?" After shouting furiously for a while, he realized that Big Boss Chu had already disappeared. Chu Fian panted heavily and walked back and forth in the courtyard. He jumped back and forth and scolded. "Little bastard! You've gone too far! Little bastard! You've gone too far! I'm so pissed off! Don't let me see you! As long as I see you, I'll. Yes, you'll go and confess in front of grandfather. Say that you found me but didn't bring me back." Big Boss Chu walked out of his room with a smile on his face. He looked elegant and at ease. Chu Fian stared at him. After a long time, he sighed and wanted to cry. You'll continue to bully me. I didn't even cry when Xiao Yulong humiliated me earlier. Now I actually want to cry. He really wanted to cry. Including the broken purple crystals, there were 100 of them. They flew away from his hands just like that. He only had 5 pieces, and they were broken defective ones. Chu Yang sighed. Fourth uncle, I took them because I can. And I have a reason to. If you take them, you can only hand them to the clan. But if we hand them over, what about Lur's illness? You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.